welcome back. And if this is your first time here, you're in the right place. Tonight's video features long, scary stories from abandoned places and lost locations, perfect for relaxing and drifting into sleep. If you enjoy the stories, please like the video, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. Get comfortable and let the night take over. Story 1. I slept in the empty motel where every room key opens the same door. I found the motel because my car died on a stretch of county road that shouldn't have existed according to my GPS. The engine sputtered its last breath just after sunset, the dashboard lights winking out one by one like fireflies surrendering to night. No cell service, no passing headlights. Just the slow creep of darkness pooling in the ditches on either side of the asphalt. I should have stayed with the vehicle, should have waited for dawn, but the air had turned cold enough to see my breath, and the woods pressing close on both sides rustled with sounds that weren't quite wind. That's when I saw the sign. Faded green metal, hanging crooked on a single post, the letters bleached pale by decades of weather. Sunset Motel, vacancy. An arrow pointed down a gravel drive nearly swallowed by weeds. Desperation makes you ignore warning signs. I grabbed my backpack and walked. The motel stood in a horseshoe formation around a cracked asphalt courtyard. 12 units, all identical. Faded turquoise doors with tarnished brass numbers. Plywood covered the office window, but the vacancy sign above it glowed with soft red light. Impossible, given the dead power lines I'd noticed sagging beside the road. I tried the office door anyway, unlocked. Inside, dust lay thick on the counter, but nothing had decayed. No water stains on the ceiling tiles, no animal nests in the corners, just stillness and the faint scent of lemon-scented cleaner and something older beneath it, mothballs and loneliness. A brass key rack hung behind the counter with 12 hooks, 11 held keys. The 12th hook, room 7, stood empty. Each key tag bore a room number handwritten in precise cursive. A leather-bound register lay open on the counter, the most recent entry dated October 17, 1989. Mr. A. Finch, room 4, paid cash. Beneath it, a single sentence scrawled in different ink. The keys don't open the rooms. Rooms open the keys. I told myself it was a prank, a bored clerk's joke. I took the key for room 1, the one closest to the office, and stepped back into the courtyard. The vacancy sign's red glow cast long, distorted shadows across the pavement. My breath plumed in air that had dropped 20 degrees since sunset. I inserted the key into room 1's lock. It turned smoothly. The door swung inward without a sound. Inside, a standard motel room. 2 double beds with floral bedspreads. A television set with a curved screen. A small desk beside the window. But the details were wrong. The bedspread pattern didn't match the photograph in the office brochure. The television brand was different. And on the desk sat a half-finished glass of water, condensation still beating the sides as if poured minutes earlier. I backed out and closed the door. Checked the number on the doorframe. 1. Checked the key tag in my hand. 1. I walked to room 2, inserted its key, and turned the knob. Same room, same bedspread pattern that didn't match any brochure, same television brand, same half-finished glass of water on the desk, though this one contained what looked like whiskey. I stepped inside slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. The air was colder here, 58 degrees Fahrenheit, according to a wall thermometer that shouldn't have been working. I approached the glass, touched its surface. Cold, wet, real. I backed out. Tried room 3, same room, different details. The glass now held coffee, steam still rising from its surface. Room 4 held orange juice. Room 5 held red wine. Room 6 held nothing but an empty glass waiting to be filled. I stood in the courtyard at 9:23 p.m., sweat cooling on my skin despite the dropping temperature. The vacancy sign's red glow had intensified, casting the entire courtyard in bloody light. I tried every key on the ring. Room 8 opened to the same space with a child's toy train set up on the floor. Room 9 held a woman's purse on the bed, makeup scattered beside it. Room 10 contained a suitcase open to reveal men's clothing neatly folded. Room 11 held a laptop powered onto a half-written email. Room 12, supposedly the last unit, opened to a room identical to the others, except the beds were made with military precision and a single photograph rested on the pillow. A young soldier in dress uniform, his face frozen in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Every key opened the same door to the same room with variations that felt deliberately curated, not random, not chaotic. Each iteration suggested an occupant who had just stepped out. Coffee still warm, emails half-written, toys recently played with. The room wasn't empty. It was waiting. I returned to the office and examined the register more closely. Flipping through pages revealed a pattern. Every guest since 1972 had been assigned room 4 initially. Every single one. And every entry after the first night contained the same notation in the remarks column. Requested room change. Granted. But the room numbers never changed. Mr. A. Finch remained in room 4 for 17 nights, according to the ledger. Mrs. Eleanor Vance stayed 23 nights. James K. Miller, 31 nights, all in room 4, all requesting changes that never appeared in the official record. The final entry before the 1989 notation belonged to a clerk named Robert Shaw. His handwriting grew increasingly frantic across 3 pages. October 14th, 1989. Guest in room 4 requested change to room 7. Explained room 7 has been condemned since 78. Guest insisted. Gave him key anyway. October 15th, 1989. Guest returned at 3 a.m., demanding room 7 key again. Said he'd been in room 4 all night despite using room 7 key. Gave him key. Watched him walk to room 7. Door opened. He entered. I counted to 60, went to check. Room 7 empty. Guest standing outside room 4 holding his luggage. Said he'd just arrived. October 16th, 1989. Guest hasn't slept in 36 hours. Eyes bloodshot. Keeps saying the room. Changes when he's not looking. Gave him room 7 key again. Watched him enter. Waited 5 minutes. Opened door. Room empty except for the photograph on a pillow. The soldier's face had changed. It was the guest's face now, smiling that same empty smile. October 17th, 1989. Guest is gone. Room 4, empty. But the key is back on the rack. Room 7 key missing. I tried every key on every door. All open to room 4, even the office door. Even my own apartment door 3 miles away. I've been in room 4 for 3 days now. The coffee is always fresh. The bed is always made. The photograph on the pillow changes every morning. This morning It was my face. Tomorrow it will be yours. Don't take the key. Don't. The entry ended mid-sentence. The page was stained with what looked like dried tears, or possibly blood. I dropped the register as if burned. My phone had died hours ago. My car was 2 miles back the way I'd come. The vacancy sign's red glow pulsed rhythmically now like a slow heartbeat. 9:47 p.m., according to the clock on the office wall, a clock that shouldn't have been running. I made a decision. I would sleep in the car. Better the cold metal shell of my dead sedan than this impossible geometry of doors and rooms. I stepped outside, turned toward the gravel drive, and found myself standing inside room 4. Not the courtyard, not the drive, the room itself, exactly as I'd seen it through room 1's door hours earlier. The half-finished glass of water sat on the desk. The beds were made with crisp white sheets. The wall thermometer read 54 degrees Fahrenheit. I spun around. The door stood closed behind me. I yanked it open. The office, exactly as I'd left it. The register open on the counter, the key rack hanging behind it. I stepped through, slammed the office door shut, locked it with a deadbolt I hadn't noticed before, leaned against the wood, gasping. A soft knock came from the other side, not the motel courtyard side, the interior side, the side that should have opened to the manager's quarters. I hadn't checked that door, hadn't even noticed it until now. Another soft knock, then a voice. My voice, but strained with exhaustion I hadn't yet felt. Let me in. I just need to sleep. I didn't answer, didn't move. The knocking continued for exactly 17 seconds before stopping. Silence returned, heavier now, charged with expectation. I checked the wall clock. 10:03 p.m. The temperature gauge beside it read 52 degrees Fahrenheit. I spent the next 3 hours testing every exit. The office's front door opened to room 4. The back door opened to room 4. The bathroom window, when I finally pried it open, revealed not the night sky, but the room's interior reflected back at me, my own terrified face staring through glass from the other side. I was trapped in a perfect loop with no seams, no edges, no way to determine where the room ended and I began. At 1:17 a.m., exhaustion overcame fear. I lay on one of the beds fully clothed, my back to the door, my eyes fixed on the digital clock radio that hadn't been there before. It displayed 1:17 a.m. The temperature gauge on the nightstand read 48 degrees Fahrenheit. I told myself I'd stay awake just until dawn, just until the impossible geometry relaxed its grip with morning light. I fell asleep at 2:04 a.m. I dreamed of corridors stretching into infinity, doors opening onto identical rooms, each containing a version of myself at a different age. Child me, building pillow forts on the bed, teenage me staring at the ceiling with headphones on, adult me packing a suitcase with trembling hands. All of us looked up as I passed, our eyes meeting in perfect unison, our mouths forming the same silent word, stay. I woke at 3:33 a.m. to the sound of a key turning in the lock. The door opened slowly. A figure stepped inside, not a monster or ghost, but a man in his late 50s, wearing a motel uniform crisp and clean, despite the hour. His face was kind, but exhausted. The skin beneath his eyes bruised with sleeplessness. He carried a brass key ring identical to the one I'd taken from the office. "Robert Shaw," he said, his voice soft as falling dust. I was the clerk in 1989. I've been here since." He didn't approach, just stood by the door, his posture radiating a profound weariness that went deeper than bone. "The room doesn't want your life," he continued. "It wants your attention, your observation. Without someone to witness it, the room unravels. Without a guest to occupy it, the doors lose their meaning. We're not prisoners here. We're anchors." I sat up slowly, my muscles stiff with cold. "How do I leave?" Robert smiled sadly. "You don't." "Not really. You can walk out that door any time you like, but you'll just enter another version of this room, in a different motel, a different town, a different life. The room follows those who've seen its true nature. It's been following me for 37 years. He stepped closer, placed the key ring on the nightstand beside the clock. "The previous guest left 3 days ago. Went through the door believing he was walking to his car. He's probably checking into another motel right now, thinking he escaped. He'll use his key, open his door, and find himself back here." Robert's eyes met mine. "You're the new anchor. I'm free to go." He turned and walked out the door without looking back. I heard his footsteps receding down what should have been the courtyard, then silence. I waited until dawn bled gray through the window that shouldn't have existed. The temperature gauge read 42 degrees Fahrenheit. The clock radio displayed 6:17 a.m. I stood on trembling legs and approached the door, turned the knob. The courtyard stretched before me under pale morning light. Dew glittered on the asphalt. My car sat exactly where I'd left it, 2 miles down the gravel drive, visible through the trees at the property's edge. Freedom. I stepped outside, locked the door behind me, walked toward the office to return the key. The office door stood open. Inside, the register lay open to a fresh page. My name was written at the top in precise cursive. Beneath it, a single entry dated today. Room 4, paid cash. I dropped the key ring on the counter and ran. Didn't look back. Reached my car in 7 minutes flat, my lungs burning, my legs numb with cold. The engine turned over on the first try, a miracle I didn't question. I drove until the county road intersected a state highway marked with real signs and real mile markers. Stopped at a diner 50 miles east, ordered coffee with shaking hands. The waitress refilled my cup without being asked. "Rough night?" she asked, her eyes lingering on my dust-caked shoes. I almost told her everything, almost described the room and its impossible geometry. But something stopped me. The memory of Robert Shaw's exhausted eyes, the certainty that some truths, once spoken, become invitations. "Just got lost," I said. She nodded slowly. "Happens more than you'd think around here, folks. Take a wrong turn, end up at motels that shouldn't exist." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "They say there's a room out there that collects witnesses, not the dead, the seen, the ones who looked behind the curtain and understood the machinery. The room needs anchors to stay real, and anchors eventually rust." She walked away before I could ask more. I finished my coffee and paid in cash. As I walked to my car, I noticed something strange, a faint tracery of brass-colored light, like a key's reflection, visible just beneath the skin of my wrists when I held them at a certain angle to the morning sun. I drove straight to a motel chain 3 states away, booked a room with a credit card, took the key from the clerk's hand, walked to room 214, inserted the key, turned the knob. The door opened to room 4. Same bedspread, same television, same half-finished glass of water on the desk, though this one contained what looked like whiskey. The wall thermometer read 58 degrees Fahrenheit. The clock radio displayed 6:17 p.m. I didn't panic, didn't run, just closed the door gently and sat on the edge of the bed. The photograph on the pillow had changed. It showed me sitting exactly where I was now, my face calm, my eyes holding a knowledge that hadn't been there this morning. The room isn't haunted by the dead. It's maintained by the witnessed, and it's always looking for new anchors to hold its impossible geometry together while the old ones finally, blessedly, walk out the door, believing they're free. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a device I hadn't brought into the room. The screen displayed a single notification. Your shift begins at dusk. The next guest will arrive at 9:47 p.m. I picked up the glass of whiskey. It was still cold, still waiting. And for the first time since walking into the Sunset Motel, I felt something close to peace. The room doesn't want your life. It just wants someone to witness its perfection, to acknowledge that every door opens to the same truth. We're all just passing through identical rooms, hoping the next key will finally take us home. But home was never a place. It was the moment before you turned the key, the breath before you crossed the threshold, the beautiful, terrible uncertainty of not knowing what waits on the other side. I set the glass down, smoothed the bedspread, waited for the knock at the door. The next guest will be desperate, exhausted, certain they've found sanctuary. They'll take the key without reading the fine print. They'll open the door believing it leads somewhere new. And I'll be waiting to explain the truth. Every room key opens the same door because there's only ever been one room. And it's been waiting for you since the moment you first wondered if anywhere truly felt like home. That's where this story ends. Let's continue with the next. The highway that vanished from maps still has cars parked along its shoulder. I found the road because my GPS died at the worst possible moment. A sharp left turn on County Route 42 where the asphalt dissolved into gravel without warning. My phone screen flickered to static, then black. No signal bars, no emergency calls. Just the hum of tires on loose stone and the slow creep of dusk bleeding orange across the sky. I should have turned back immediately, but the gravel road stretched straight and level ahead, and pride is a powerful fuel when you're already lost. 20 minutes in, the trees fell away on both sides, revealing a sight that made me brake hard enough to fishtail. A 4-lane divided highway, cutting through the wilderness like a surgical scar. Perfect asphalt, faded but intact lane markings, guardrails gleaming dully in the twilight, and running alongside it in both directions, a continuous line of vehicles parked shoulder to shoulder as far as my headlights could reach. Not abandoned wrecks, not rusted skeletons picked clean by time. These cars were pristine. Late 90s sedans with uncracked windshields, early 2000s SUVs with full tanks of gas visible through translucent fuel gauges, even a few newer models that couldn't have been more than 5 years old. All parked with military precision, wheels perfectly parallel to the white line, engines cold but interiors untouched. No luggage on roofs, no emergency triangles in rear windows, just vehicles left exactly as their drivers had exited them, keys presumably still in ignitions, lives suspended mid-motion. I killed my engine and stepped out into silence so complete it felt like pressure against my eardrums. No wind in the pines, no insect hum, just the slow tick of my own cooling engine and the faint, sweet smell of gasoline and something else, ozone, like the air after lightning strikes. A green highway sign stood at the entrance to this impossible stretch of pavement. The top placard read Interstate 84 in standard federal font. Beneath it, a smaller sign bore a single word in block letters, Welcome. I checked my phone again. Dead. But my car's dashboard clock still worked, 6:47 p.m. I walked to the nearest vehicle, a silver Honda Accord with Pennsylvania plates, and peered through the driver's side window. The seat was pushed back as if for a tall driver. A coffee cup sat in the holder, its contents dark and still. A folded newspaper rested on the passenger seat. I tried the door handle, unlocked. Inside, the air was cool and carried the faint scent of pine air freshener. The newspaper was dated October 17th, 2003. The front page headline, Local Teacher Honored for Volunteer Work. I flipped through the pages, local news, sports scores, comic section, with a half-finished crossword puzzle, pen still tucked in the crease. Nothing suggested emergency or flight. Just an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, interrupted. I moved to the next car, a red pickup truck with Nebraska plates. Same story. Keys in the ignition, wallet on the seat containing $23 and a driver's license belonging to Robert J. Miller, born 1968. A family photograph tucked in the sun visor. Robert smiling beside a woman and two children on a beach I didn't recognize. The photo felt warm to the touch, as if recently handled. The third car held a child's car seat with a stuffed rabbit buckled into the harness. The fourth contained a laptop open to a half-written email. The fifth held groceries in the trunk, milk still cold to the touch, bread wrapped in plastic that crinkled with fresh resistance. I walked a quarter-mile down the shoulder, checking vehicles at random. Everyone told the same story. Ordinary people engaged in ordinary activities. Their lives paused with surgical precision at approximately 6:45 p.m. on various dates spanning 3 decades. A 1997 minivan with Disney World souvenirs on the back seat. A 2011 hybrid with a yoga mat in the trunk. A 2024 electric sedan with a phone charger still plugged into the console, all frozen, all waiting, and all facing the same direction, eastbound. I returned to my car and made a decision that still haunts me. I would drive the highway just to the next exit, just to see where it led. I pulled onto the asphalt and accelerated to 55 miles per hour. My headlights cutting twin tunnels through the gathering dark. The road stretched straight ahead, perfectly maintained, the painted lines unwavering. No potholes, no cracks, no signs of weathering, despite the wilderness pressing close on both sides. Mile markers appeared at precise intervals, 0, 1, 2, each one pristine, the numbers freshly painted, though no maintenance crews had passed this way in decades, if ever. At mile marker 7, I saw the first body. It stood beside a blue station wagon, one hand resting on the roof as if taking a brief rest during a long journey. Male, late 50s, wearing khakis and a polo shirt. His back was to me as I slowed the car. I rolled down my window. "Sir, are you okay?" He didn't turn. didn't acknowledge my presence, just stood there, perfectly still, his posture relaxed as if enjoying a pleasant evening stroll. I killed the engine and stepped out. "Sir?" I circled the car to face him. Where his face should have been was smooth, featureless skin stretched taut over bone. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just seamless flesh the color of old parchment. He didn't move, didn't breathe. But when I reached out to touch his shoulder, just to confirm he was real, his head rotated a full 180 degrees to face me directly. The smooth skin of his face tilted slightly as if listening. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. The thing didn't pursue, didn't move at all beyond that impossible rotation. I scrambled back into my car, locked the doors, and accelerated eastbound without looking back. At mile marker 12, I saw more of them. Dozens. Standing beside their vehicles or walking slowly along the shoulder, all moving eastward with that same unhurried gait, all faceless, all silent. They parted to let my car pass without breaking stride, their smooth heads turning in unison to track my movement. None approached. None reached for my vehicle. They simply observed with whatever senses remained beneath that seamless skin. I drove with white knuckles on the wheel, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. The dashboard clock ticked forward. 7:03 p.m., 7:04 p.m., 7:05 p.m. At 7:07 p.m., it stopped. The digital display froze on 7:07. I glanced at my phone, miraculously powered on now, screen glowing with impossible signal bars. The time read 7:07 p.m. exactly. I looked up just as my headlights illuminated the next mile marker. It read 7:07. Not mile 7.07. The marker itself displayed the time, 7:07, in place of a distance measurement. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded to a halt on the pristine asphalt. I stepped out, legs unsteady, and approached the sign on trembling feet. Beneath the time, smaller lettering read, "Your appointment." I turned slowly, taking in the highway stretching in both directions. The faceless figures had stopped their walking. Every one of them stood perfectly still, facing my car. Hundreds of them now, men, women, children, all smooth-faced, all silent. They didn't advance, didn't retreat, just waited. A new sound began, not from the figures, but from the cars themselves. A soft, rhythmic clicking from every vehicle within earshot, not engine starting, not hazard lights activating. The sound of turn signals, left turn signals, all blinking in perfect unison, their amber lights pulsing like a single heartbeat, stretching the length of the highway. Click whir, click whir, click whir. I ran back to my car, threw it into reverse, and accelerated westbound, the direction I'd come from. The faceless figures didn't move to stop me, just watched with their blank faces as I fled. Mile markers flashed past in reverse, 7:06, 7:05, 7:04. The clock on my dash remained frozen at 7:07. At mile marker 3, I saw my exit, a narrow gravel road branching northward, identical to the one I'd entered on hours earlier. I swerved onto it without slowing, tires spitting stone, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The highway vanished behind me, swallowed by trees. After 2 miles, my GPS flickered back to life. Signal bars returned. The screen displayed my location with perfect accuracy. I drove until dawn, stopping only when I reached a 24-hour diner 50 miles from anything resembling civilization. I ordered coffee and sat in a vinyl booth watching the sunrise through a clean window. My hand still trembled when I lifted the mug, not from cold, from the memory of those smooth faces turning in unison, from the certainty that I'd been expected. The waitress refilled my cup without being asked. "Rough night?" she asked, her eyes lingering on my dust-caked shoes. I almost told her everything, almost described the highway and its silent congregation. But something stopped me. The memory of those turn signals blinking in unison, that perfect rhythm suggesting a system far older and more patient than I could comprehend. "Just got lost," I said. She nodded slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. "Happens more than you'd think around here. Folks take a wrong turn on County 42, end up on roads that shouldn't exist." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "They say there's a highway out there that collects people, not the dead, the almost dead, the ones who should have died in car crashes but walked away, the ones who survived heart attacks in the middle of nowhere. The highway finds them when they're lost, gives them an appointment they can't miss." I set my coffee down carefully. "What kind of appointment?" She straightened up, her professional smile returning. "That's not for me to say. But if you ever find yourself on a road with cars parked too perfectly along the shoulder, don't stop to help anyone, don't accept rides, and whatever you do, don't look at your clock when it hits 7:07. She walked away before I could ask more. I finished my coffee and paid in cash, leaving a generous tip. As I walked to my car, I noticed something strange, a faint tracery of amber light, like the glow of a turn signal visible just beneath the skin of my wrists when I held them at a certain angle to the morning sun. It faded as I watched, but I knew it would return, in moments of stillness, in the space between waking and sleep. I drove straight to a mechanic in the next town over. "Check everything," I told him, "especially the turn signal mechanism." He spent 3 hours under the hood and inside the dashboard. When he emerged, his face was pale. "Your left turn signal is physically disconnected," he said. "The wiring's been cut. Has been for a while by the look of the corrosion. It shouldn't work at all." I didn't tell him it had. Been blinking perfectly in unison with hundreds of other cars just hours earlier. Didn't tell him about the frozen clock or the faceless figures or the mile marker that displayed my appointment time. Some truths, once spoken aloud, become invitations. That was 3 weeks ago. I've moved twice, changed my phone number, avoided all roads with gravel shoulders. But every day at 7:06 p.m., my devices freeze. Every night at 7:06 a.m., I wake to the sound of rhythmic clicking. Last Tuesday, I found a single amber LED blinking steadily on my dashboard, though no turn signal was activated. I disconnected the car battery. Yesterday, the blinking appeared on my laptop keyboard. Tiny lights pulsing beneath the F and G keys in perfect 7:07 rhythm. The highway didn't take me that night. It just scheduled me. And appointments on that road are never canceled, only rescheduled for those who try to run. I'm writing this at 7:06 p.m. The air in my apartment has gone still. My laptop clock is stuttering. 7:06:53, 7:06:54. I can hear them now, not on the highway, but in the walls themselves. The soft, rhythmic click whir of turn signals counting down the final minute. 7:06:58, 7:06:59. The highway isn't haunted by the dead. It's maintained by the almost dead, and it always needs new attendants to keep the lanes clear for the next appointment. 70700. My left turn signal has started blinking on its own, and I can't remember which direction leads home anymore. That brings this story to a close. Let's carry on to the next one. The abandoned train station announces arrivals for trains that never come. I took the job because the posting mentioned historical preservation and paid 3 times the minimum wage. No interview, no background check. Just an email with coordinates and instructions. Report to Blackwater Station at 10 p.m. Key under third flower pot on west entrance. Log arrivals in ledger on conductor's desk. Do not miss any announcements. The station had been abandoned since 1972 when the floodwaters swallowed the tracks for 50 miles in either direction. No trains had run through Blackwater in 50 years, but the email insisted on logging arrivals. I told myself it was a night security gig with eccentric requirements. Desperation makes you rationalize anything. The station stood alone in a field of waist-high grass, its brick facade bleached pale by decades of weather. Ivy clawed up the walls but stopped precisely 6 inches below the roof line as if repelled by an invisible barrier. Thursday, okay. Platform stretched into darkness in both directions. The tracks beyond it vanished beneath a carpet of vegetation that looked deliberately cultivated. Uniform height, no weeds, no debris. Like a lawn grown over a grave. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, dust lay thick on every surface, but nothing had decayed. No water stains on the vaulted ceiling, no pigeon nests in the rafters, no rust on the ticket window's iron grates, just stillness and the faint scent of coal smoke and lemon polish. The conductor's desk sat center platform beneath a massive analog clock whose hands had stopped at 11:17. A leather-bound ledger rested open atop it, filled with precise handwriting. 2200. Station secure. Temperature 64 degrees Fahrenheit. 22:15. Announcement for 10:15 express to Albany. No train. 22:30. Station secure. Temperature 63 degrees Fahrenheit. 22:45. Announcement for 10:45 local to Millersburg. No train. 2300. Station secure. Temperature 62 degrees Fahrenheit. 23:15. Announcement for 11:15 express to Albany. No train. Platform mist observed. 23:30. Station secure. Temperature 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Mist receding. 23:45. Announcement for 11:45 local to Millersburg. No train. Footsteps heard on tracks. 00. Station secure. Temperature 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Footsteps ceased. 00:15. Announcement for 12:15. Express to Albany. No train. Figure observed at far end of platform. 0:30. Station secure. Temperature 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Figure gone. 0:45. Announcement for 12:45 local to Millersburg. No train. Whistling heard. 1 o'clock. Station secure. Temperature 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Whistling ceased. 1:15. Announcement for 1:15 express to Albany. Train observed approaching. Did not stop. Passengers visible at windows, all facing away from platform. 1:30. Station secure. Temperature 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Train departed eastbound. No sound of wheels on tracks. 1:45. Announcement for 1:45 local to Millersburg. No train. Cold intensifying. 2 o'clock. Cannot find conductor's desk. Platform elongated. Temperature 42 degrees Fahrenheit. 2:15. Back at desk. No memory of return. Hands numb. Announcement imminent. 2:30. Announcement for 2:30 express to Albany. Train arrived. Doors opened. Something inside called my name. Did not board. 2:45. Station secure. Temperature 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Regret not boarding. 300. Announcement for 300 local to Millersburg. Train arrived. Doors opened. Something inside called my mother's name. She's been dead 20 years. 3:15. Cannot write straight. Pen heavy. Cold in bones. They're waiting. 3:30. Announcement for 3:30. Express to Albany. Train arrived. Doors opened. I see them now. The passengers. They're not facing away. They have no faces. Just smooth skin where features should be. 3:45. Boarding next train. Better than waiting. Better than the cold. Better than the announcements that know things they shouldn't know. 4 o'clock. The page ended with a single sentence scrawled so hard the pen had torn through the paper. The trains don't stop here anymore because no one left to meet them. I checked my phone. 10:03 p.m., 3 minutes until the first announcement. I pocketed the key. Stupid, I know, before completing the job, but the weight of it felt like an anchor. I sat at the conductor's desk and waited. At exactly 10:15 p.m., the station speakers crackled to life. Attention passengers, the 10:15 express to Albany is now arriving on track 1. Please have your tickets ready. The voice was warm, paternal, slightly crackled with age, but perfectly clear. It came from speakers mounted along the platform ceiling. Speakers coated in dust, but functioning with impossible fidelity. I stood and walked to the edge of the platform. Track 1 was a tangle of weeds and rusted rails half buried in soil. No train approached. No headlight pierced the darkness. Just the whisper of wind through tall grass. I returned to the desk and wrote my first entry with a hand that only trembled slightly. 22:15. Announcement for 10:15 express to Albany. No train. The lie felt like surrender. But what was the alternative? Documenting that I'd heard a ghost? The pattern repeated every 15 minutes. 10:45 local to Millersburg, 11:15 express to Albany. Each announcement crisp and warm, each train absent. I made rounds between entries, walking the platform's length, checking the boarded ticket windows, peering into the darkness beyond the tracks. Nothing moved except the slow creep of cold. The temperature gauge beside the conductor's desk ticked downward with each passing hour. 63 degrees Fahrenheit. 62 degrees Fahrenheit. 61 degrees Fahrenheit. At 11:15 p.m., something changed. The announcement played as scheduled, but this time a fine mist rolled across the platform, not from the fields, but from the tracks themselves, coalescing from nothing into a knee-high fog that smelled of damp wool and coal smoke. I stepped back from a platform edge as the mist thickened, swirling in patterns that suggested footsteps, though no feet disturbed its surface. The mist reached the station wall, paused, then receded as quickly as it had appeared. The temperature gauge read 59 degrees Fahrenheit. I didn't write about the mist, didn't document the footsteps I'd almost heard beneath the mist's whisper. Some truths, once committed to paper, become permanent. Midnight brought the first figure. The 12:15 announcement crackled through the speakers. As the voice faded, I saw it, a silhouette at the far eastern end of the platform where the brickwork dissolved into darkness. Tall, motionless, too far to discern features, but unmistakably human-shaped. I stood frozen, my pen hovering over the ledger. 30 seconds passed. A minute. The figure didn't move, didn't approach, just stood at the edge of visibility like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence. I forced myself to walk toward it. 20 steps, 40, 60. The platform seemed to stretch beneath my feet. The figure remained the same distance ahead no matter how far I walked. At 100 steps, I stopped, turned around. The conductor's desk was gone. The station building had vanished. I stood on an infinite platform suspended in starless blackness, the mist curling around my ankles. Panic seized my throat. I spun back toward the figure. It stood 10 feet away now, not a person, a suggestion of a person, light and shadow arranged into humanoid shape, featureless where a face should be. It raised one arm and pointed down the platform behind me, not threatening, directing. I turned. The station had reappeared exactly where it should have been, the conductor's desk visible beneath the stopped clock. I ran, didn't look back, collapsed into the chair at 12:32 a.m., my shirt soaked with cold sweat. The temperature gauge read 54 degrees Fahrenheit. My entry was a single line. 0030, station secure, temperature 54 degrees Fahrenheit. I didn't mention the figure, didn't document the infinite platform. The ledger felt like a contract now, every truth I wrote binding me deeper to this place. At 1:15 a.m., the impossible happened. The announcement played, then came sound, a low, mournful whistle cutting through the night, not from speakers, from the tracks. Real sound, physical vibration traveling up through the platform's concrete. I stood slowly, my blood turning to ice. Headlights pierced the darkness, two perfect circles of gold advancing with impossible silence. No rumble of diesel, no screech of wheels on rails, just the whistle and the light growing steadily brighter. The train emerged from the mist, not a modern locomotive, a steam engine from another century, polished brass gleaming, smokestack exhaling vapor that smelled of cinnamon and regret. Behind it stretched passenger cars with lit windows revealing silhouettes moving within. The train slowed as it approached the platform, brakes hissing with authentic pressure. It stopped precisely aligned with the yellow safety line painted on the platform edge. Doors slid open with soft hydraulic sighs. Inside the nearest car, passengers sat in plush, velvet seats, all facing away from the platform, all perfectly still. The air around the open doorway shimmered with cold, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, according to the gauge that now stood beside the door, though I'd left it on the desk. A voice emerged from the car, not the announcement voice, but something older, softer. It spoke my name, not shouted, not whispered, just stated, as if confirming an expected arrival. I didn't move, didn't breathe, stood frozen as the voice spoke again, adding my mother's maiden name, the name I hadn't heard since childhood, the name my father took to his grave. The doors began to close. I lunged forward without thinking, my hand outstretched to stop them. My fingertips brushed the door's edge and recoiled instantly. The metal wasn't cold. It was warm, pulsing with a slow rhythmic heat like living tissue. The doors sealed shut. The train pulled away without sound, its taillight shrinking into the darkness until only the mist remained. I stumbled back to the desk. My entry at 1:30 a.m. was illegible, ink smeared by trembling hands. I tried again. 1:30, train observed, did not board. The words felt like a betrayal, like I'd refused an invitation I'd spend the rest of my life regretting. The cold intensified after that. 48 degrees Fahrenheit, 42 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Fahrenheit. My breath plumed in thick clouds. I wrapped my arms around myself, rubbing my hands together, but the cold penetrated deeper than skin. It seeped into bone, into thought itself. At 2:15 a.m., the platform elongated again. I stood to make my round and walked for 5 minutes without reaching either end. The station building remained visible ahead but never grew closer. Behind me, the darkness deepened into something solid, a wall of absence that pressed against my back with physical force. I stopped walking, closed my eyes, counted to 10, opened them. I sat at the conductor's desk, the ledger open to a fresh page, no memory of returning. My hands were numb blocks, incapable of holding the pen. The temperature gauge read 34 degrees Fahrenheit. The 2:30 announcement played. Attention passengers, the 2:30 express to Albany is now arriving on track 1. Please have your tickets ready. The train appeared exactly as before. Silent approach, warm headlights, doors sliding open with that soft sigh. This time, the passengers had turned. Not fully, just enough to show the backs of their heads, the smooth, seamless skin where features should have been, and they were holding tickets. Small, white rectangles clutched in hands that seemed to have too many joints. The voice from the car spoke again. Not my name this time, my social security number, digit by digit, then my childhood address, then the name of my first pet, a detail I'd never told anyone, not even my parents, because I'd invented the dog in my imagination during a lonely summer at age 7. The doors began closing. I stood, took one step toward the platform edge, stopped, turned back to the desk, sat. The doors sealed. The train departed. The temperature gauge read 30 degrees Fahrenheit. At 3 a.m., the local to Millersburg arrived. The voice from the car spoke my mother's name, then my father's, then the name of my stillborn brother, the child my mother had miscarried at 5 months, the loss she'd carried in silence for 40 years, the secret I'd discovered only in her diary after her funeral. The doors opened. I stood, walked to the platform edge, stared into the car. The faceless passengers turned slightly, their smooth heads tilting in unison as if listening. One extended a hand, not toward me, but palm up, offering an empty space where a ticket should rest. I stepped back, returned to the desk, wrote 0300, train observed, did not board. The temperature gauge read 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Frost bloomed across the ledger's pages in delicate fractal patterns. My pen froze to my fingers. I pried it loose with teeth that chattered uncontrollably. At 3:15 a.m., the announcement played for a train that didn't exist in the schedule. The iChop 3:15 midnight special to nowhere. The voice was different now. Not warm, not paternal. My voice, speaking from the speakers with perfect fidelity. "You've waited long enough," it said. "They're waiting for you. your mother, your father, the brother you never met, they're all aboard, all the people you've lost, all the moments you've regretted. The train collects what the world leaves behind, and you've left so much behind. The train that arrived wasn't steam or diesel. It was made of light and memory, a shimmering construct of every train I'd ever seen in photographs, films, dreams. Its cars stretched into impossible distance, windows glowing with the warm light of every home I'd ever missed. The doors opened, and I saw them, my mother smiling from a window seat, my father waving from the vestibule, a child who might have been my brother pressing small hands against the glass. The voice, my voice, spoke one final time. The only ticket required is surrender. I stood, walked to the platform edge. The cold no longer bothered me. The fear had burned away, leaving only a profound, aching loneliness. I had spent my life running from loss, from regret, from the empty spaces people leave behind, and here was a train that promised to fill every one of them. I took one step forward, then stopped, because I saw it. The reflection in the train window wasn't my face approaching the door. It was the previous watcher's face, the one who'd written the ledger entries. His features were stretched in terror, his mouth open in a silent scream, his hands pressed against the inside of the glass as if trying to escape. Behind him, the faceless passengers turned their smooth heads toward him, not with malice, but with hunger. The train didn't collect the lost. It collected the lonely, and loneliness was a currency this place consumed with endless appetite. I stepped back, turned, walked to the conductor's desk. The temperature gauge read 26 degrees Fahrenheit. My fingers were blue, blocks incapable of gripping a pen, but I managed 3 words on a fresh page. I did not board. At 3:30 a.m., dawn began bleeding gray at the eastern horizon. The announcements ceased. The cold receded. The station returned to stillness, just dust and decay and the faint scent of coal smoke. I sat at the desk until sunlight touched the platform, my body stiff with cold, but my mind terrifyingly clear. I left at first light, didn't look back. Drove until my car sputtered onto a highway with other vehicles and gas stations and the blessed noise of civilization. I showered in a motel bathroom for an hour, scrubbing my skin until it burned, trying to wash away the memory of that warm, pulsing door. But the station didn't release me unmarked. That evening, my phone buzzed with a notification from an app I'd never installed. Your next shift begins tonight at 10 p.m. Blackwater Station awaits. The temperature in my motel room dropped 10 degrees in seconds. Frost bloomed across the window pane in perfect fractal patterns, and from the hallway outside my door came the soft, mournful whistle of a steam engine that hadn't run in 50 years. I'm writing this in a diner 3 states away. The waitress just refilled my coffee without being asked. She has kind eyes. I almost told her everything, almost described the faceless passengers and the warm doors and the voice that knew my secrets, but I stopped myself, because as she walked away, I saw it, the faint tracery of frost visible just beneath the skin of her wrists when she held the coffee pot at a certain angle to the light. The station isn't haunted by the dead. It's staffed by the almost lost, and it's always hiring night watchmen to log arrivals for trains that never come, because someone has to witness the hunger. Someone has to refuse the invitation. Someone has to sit at the conductor's desk and write "No train" while the doors open and the voices call your name. My phone just buzzed again. 9:47 p.m. 13 minutes until my shift begins. The diner's front door just opened, though no one entered, and from the speakers above the counter, a system that only plays 1950s pop music, came a voice warm and paternal and impossibly familiar. "Attention passengers, the 10 p.m. shift relief is now arriving on track 1. Please have your keys ready." I can smell coal smoke and lemon polish, and I can't remember which direction leads home anymore. And with that, this story comes to an end. Let's move on to the next one. The flooded town still has working streetlights beneath 6 feet of water. I took the job because the ad mentioned underwater documentation and paid $5,000 for 48 hours of work. No diving certification required, no background check. Just an email with GPS coordinates and instructions. Report to Lock Haven Reservoir Spillway at dusk. Boat and equipment provided. Document streetlights in Sector 7. Do not descend below 15 feet. The town had been flooded in 1978 when the federal government dammed the Blackwater River for hydroelectric power. 300 homes, a main street, a school, a church, all submerged beneath 60 feet of water that had since been designated a protected wildlife habitat. No one had legally entered the reservoir in 45 years, but the email insisted on documenting street lights. I told myself it was an environmental survey gig with eccentric requirements. Desperation makes you rationalize anything. The boat waited at the spillway dock, a flat-bottomed aluminum craft with an electric motor and a waterproof case containing a GoPro, a depth gauge, and a single brass key stamped with the number 7. No note, no explanation, just the key resting on top of the camera like an afterthought. I started the motor and guided the boat toward Sector 7, the eastern quadrant of the reservoir, marked on a laminated map tucked beneath the seat. The water was unnaturally still, no ripples from wind, no disturbance from fish, just a perfect mirror reflecting the bruised purple of twilight sky. At exactly 7:03 p.m., the first streetlight ignited beneath the surface. Not a flicker, not a gradual brightening. A sudden, perfect bloom of amber light 6 feet below the waterline, its glow cutting a perfect cone through the murk to illuminate a section of pavement that shouldn't have existed. I killed the motor and drifted directly above it, leaned over the gunwale with the GoPro recording. The light stood on a wrought iron pole exactly as it would have on dry land in 1978. Glass globe intact, wiring visible through the water as delicate traceries of silver, the base planted firmly in cracked asphalt that stretched into darkness in all directions. And it was on, not flickering, not short-circuiting, burning with steady, impossible luminescence as if powered by a grid that had been severed nearly half a century ago. I checked the depth gauge, 6 feet exactly. The email's warning echoed in my skull. Do not descend below 15 feet. But 6 feet wasn't 15. 6 feet was just a dive. A single breath held. I stripped my underwear, strapped the GoPro to my chest, and slipped into the water. The cold hit like a physical blow, 38 degrees Fahrenheit, according to the gauge I'd clipped to my wrist. But beneath the initial shock came something worse. The water didn't feel like water. It had texture, resistance, like moving through cold syrup laced with static electricity that prickled my skin with every motion. I kicked downward, my eyes fixed on the streetlight's glow. 10 feet. 8. 6. I hovered directly beneath the surface, my face 6 feet from the light's glass globe. The amber glow cast perfect illumination across the submerged street, cracked asphalt webbed with weeds that swayed in a current I couldn't feel. A rusted mailbox stood sentinel at the curb, its flag raised as if awaiting pickup. A child's tricycle lay on its side in a gutter, one wheel slowly turning though nothing touched it. And a streetlight burned on, its filament visible through the glass, glowing with impossible heat that should have shattered the globe instantly upon contact with cold water. I reached out, just to touch the pole, just to confirm it was real. My fingers passed through solid iron as if it were mist. I jerked back, bubbles streaming from my lips. Tried again. Same result. The pole existed as light and memory rather than matter. I swam to the mailbox. Same phenomenon. My hand passed through, the metal as if reaching into a projection. The tricycle's handlebars dissolved beneath my touch, but the asphalt beneath my feet was solid. The weeds brushing my legs were real. The cold was real. Only the artifacts of human habitation existed in this half-state, present but intangible, visible but untouchable. I broke the surface at 7:11 p.m., gasping, my body trembling with cold and disorientation. The boat had drifted 20 yards east. I swam to it, hauled myself aboard, and checked the GoPro footage. The video showed exactly what I'd seen. The streetlight burning steadily 6 feet down, the mailbox, the tricycle. But at the 0047 mark, something moved in the periphery. A figure standing beneath a second streetlight 50 yards east. Tall, slender, wearing what looked like a 1970s-style dress coat. It stood perfectly still, facing my camera, though the water around it remained undisturbed by breathing or movement. At 0052, it raised one arm and pointed directly at my lens. At 0058, the footage dissolved into static for 3 seconds, before returning to normal. The figure was gone. I played the clip 6 times, zoomed on the figure's face during the frames before it pointed. Where features should have been was smooth, seamless skin stretched taut over bone. No eyes, no mouth, just a suggestion of humanity wearing the skin of a man. The second streetlight ignited at 7:15 p.m., exactly 15 minutes after the first, then a third at 7:30 p.m., a fourth at 7:45 p.m. By 8:30 p.m., a perfect grid of amber light stretched across Sector 7, each burning 6 feet beneath the surface, each illuminating a section of the drowned town with impossible fidelity. I documented them all from the boat, too terrified to dive again. The GoPro captured more figures between the lights. Dozens of them now, all smooth-faced, all motionless, all facing my boat with unnerving uniformity. At 9 p.m., the depth gauge on the boat's console began counting down, not measuring depth, counting down like a timer. 14:59, 14:58, 14:57. I stared at the display, my blood turning to ice. 15 minutes. The email's warning echoed with new meaning. Do not descend below 15 feet. Not a safety precaution. A deadline. I started the motor and headed for the spillway dock. The boat moved sluggishly as if pushing through syrup. Behind me, the streetlights brightened in sequence, their amber glow intensifying until the entire reservoir surface shimmered with reflected light. The water itself began to glow, not from above, but from within, a soft bioluminescence blooming in the depths like stars igniting in reverse. At 9:07 p.m., the boat's motor died. Not sputtered, not choked on weeds, died instantly, the propeller freezing mid-turn. I tried the ignition. Nothing. The console lights remained on. The depth gauge continued its countdown. 0823, 0822, 0821. I grabbed the oars and rowed toward the distant dock lights, my shoulders burning with effort. The boat didn't move, not even an inch. I rowed harder, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The oars cut through water that had become the consistency of gelatin, offering no resistance, yet yielding no progress. I stood and looked down. Beneath the hull, the streetlights had rearranged themselves into a perfect circle surrounding my boat. And within that circle, the water had gone perfectly clear. Not murky reservoir water, but crystalline transparency, revealing the town exactly as it had existed on the morning of evacuation day, October 14th, 1978. Houses with intact roofs, cars parked in driveways, American flags hanging limp on porches, and standing in the streets, on sidewalks, in yards, hundreds of smooth-faced figures arranged in perfect tableaus of ordinary life. A woman hanging laundry, a man washing his car, children playing hopscotch on the pavement, all frozen, all featureless, all waiting. The depth gauge hit 0500. The water around my boat began to drain, not flowing away, but simply ceasing to exist. The surface dropping 6 feet in 3 seconds, until my hull settled gently on the cracked asphalt of Main Street with a soft crunch of gravel. The streetlights still burned overhead, but now they hung in air rather than water, their amber glow illuminating a town preserved in perfect stasis. The air smelled of wet pavement and coal smoke, and something sweetly rotten beneath it. Ozone and decay mingled into a scent that shouldn't have existed outside a lightning storm. I stepped out of the boat onto dry land. The temperature gauge on my wrist read 42 degrees Fahrenheit. My clothes were bone dry despite having been soaked minutes earlier. I walked toward the nearest house, a 2-story colonial with a white picket fence and a for sale sign staked in the lawn. The sign's date read October 13th, 1978. I pushed the gate open. It swung silently on well-oiled hinges. The front door stood unlocked. Inside, dust lay thick on every surface, but nothing had decayed. A pot of soup simmered on the stove, steam rising in perfect curls. A newspaper rested on the kitchen table, the headline reading, "Dam Completion Ceremony Tomorrow." The date, October 14th, 1978. I backed out of the house, walked down the street. Every home told the same story. Meals cooking on stoves, televisions playing static-filled broadcasts, beds neatly made with indentations suggesting recent occupants. But no people. Just the smooth-faced figures standing motionless in doorways and yards, their blank faces turned toward me as I passed. At the town square, I found the church. Its steeple pierced a sky that wasn't sky, a perfect replica of twilight with stars that didn't twinkle and a moon that hung motionless. The church doors stood open. Inside, pews were filled with smooth-faced figures sitting in perfect rows, all facing the altar where a single streetlight had been erected in place of a crucifix. Its amber glow illuminated a ledger resting on the pulpit. I approached slowly, opened the ledger. The pages contained names, thousands of them, handwritten in precise cursive. Each entry included a date of arrival and a single notation in the remarks column. The earliest entries dated 1978. Sarah Mitchell, October 14, 1978, accepted the light. Thomas Chen, October 14, 1978, resisted the current. Maria Flores, October 14, 1978, chose the deep. The entries continued through decades: 1985, 1993, 2007, 2019. All people who had drowned in the reservoir according to newspaper clippings I'd researched before accepting this job, all documented here as if their deaths had been appointments kept rather than accidents suffered. The final entry before today's date was from 3 days ago. Daniel Reeves, July 18, 2026, descended below 15 feet, became anchor. Beneath it, a fresh line waited with my name already written in precise cursive. Jonathan Miller, July 21st, 2026. The pen rested beside the ledger. I didn't pick it up, didn't complete the entry. Just stood there as the street light above the altar brightened, its glow intensifying until the entire church filled with amber radiance that seeped into my skin, my bones, the spaces between my thoughts. The smooth-faced figures in the pews turned their heads in perfect unison to face me, not threatening, not hungry, just waiting for me to make a choice. The depth gauge on my wrist hit 0015. The town began to flood, not with water rushing in from outside, with water materializing from nothing, droplets condensing in midair, coalescing into streams that flowed uphill, filling streets and homes with impossible physics. The street lights didn't flicker, didn't short-circuit, just burned brighter as the water rose, 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet, until I stood chest-deep in liquid that felt like memory given form. The smooth-faced figures didn't drown. They dissolved into the water itself, their forms unraveling into shimmering particles that swirled around me like fireflies made of light. At 0003, the water reached my chin. At 0002, my lips. At 0001, my nose. I didn't fight it, didn't struggle for air, just closed my eyes as the water covered my face and discovered a terrible truth. I could breathe it, not water, not air. Something in between, a substance that carried oxygen and memory in equal measure, filling my lungs with the collective breath of everyone who had ever lived and died in this town. The depth gauge hit 0000, the street lights flared once, blinding white, and went dark. Absolute silence crashed down, not underwater silence, the silence of a held breath, of a moment suspended between inhale and exhale. I opened my eyes. I floated 6 feet beneath the surface of the reservoir, my body weightless, my lungs full of impossible substance. Above me, the boat drifted exactly where I'd left it. Below me, the town slept in perfect darkness, and around me, the smooth-faced figures drifted like plankton in a sea of potentiality, their forms constantly dissolving and reforming, their blank faces occasionally resolving into features I recognized from newspaper archives and obituaries. One drifted close, a woman in a floral dress, her face smooth as polished stone. She reached out and pressed a hand against my chest. Not cold, not warm, just present. And in that contact, I understood everything. The town hadn't drowned in 1978. It had transformed. The dam's construction had severed its connection to the living world, but the collective consciousness of its residents, 3,000 souls facing forced evacuation, had generated enough psychic energy to preserve their home in a pocket dimension sustained by memory and light. The streetlights weren't powered by electricity. They were powered by attention, by witnesses. Every time someone discovered the lights beneath the water, their observation reinforced the town's existence for another cycle. The 15-foot warning wasn't about safety. It was about commitment. Descend below 15 feet, and you became part of the mechanism, another anchor holding the town in its suspended state. Daniel Reeves had become an anchor 3 days ago, and now it was my turn. The woman's hand remained on my chest. Her face resolved briefly into features, kind eyes, a gentle smile, hair the color of wheat. She mouthed 2 words I felt rather than heard. Thank you. Then she dissolved back into the water. I floated there for what might have been minutes or hours or days. Time had no meaning in this place. The streetlights remained dark. The town slept, and I understood my purpose now, to wait, to watch, to become the next witness who would draw future explorers down with impossible lights and whispered promises until one of them, too, chose to descend below 15 feet and take my place. Dawn broke above the reservoir. Pale gold light filtered through 60 feet of water to illuminate the sleeping town. And at exactly 6:17 a.m., the first streetlight reignited, amber glow blooming 6 feet beneath the surface, its light cutting a perfect cone through the murk to illuminate cracked asphalt and a rusted mailbox with its flag raised as if awaiting pickup. I didn't rise to the surface, didn't swim for the boat, just floated 6 feet down, my lungs full of memory water, my body becoming part of the current that sustained this impossible place. The GoPro still strapped my chest, continued recording. Footage that would never be recovered, never be viewed, never explain why a man had vanished in a protected reservoir while documenting streetlights that shouldn't exist. But someone will find the boat eventually. Someone will see the lights. Someone will dive down to investigate, and when they do, I'll be waiting 6 feet below the surface, not as a monster or a ghost, but as a guide. I'll show them the town exactly as it was on the morning of October 14th, 1978. I'll let them touch the intangible artifacts. I'll watch their terror turn to wonder as they realize the water breathes and the lights remember and the town never really drowned. It just learned to live beneath the surface, sustained by the one resource reservoirs produce in abundance, the quiet desperation of people with nowhere else to go. The second streetlight ignited at 6:32 a.m., the third at 6:47 a.m. By 7:30 a.m., the entire grid burned steady beneath 60 feet of water, each lamp a beacon calling the next witness home. I am the anchor now. And anchors don't drown. They just hold the light until someone else is ready to carry it. And with that, this story comes to an end. Let's move on to the next one. The deserted Subdivision has fresh mail in every box every morning. I should have known something was wrong when the realtor handed me the keys without asking for proof of income. "Cash only," he'd said, his eyes fixed on a point just past my left shoulder. "No background check, no lease, just sign here and the house is yours." The price, $800 a month for a 3-bedroom colonial, was impossible in any market, let alone 130 miles from the city. But after the eviction, after weeks sleeping in my car with the windows cracked against the summer heat, impossible sounded like salvation. I signed. Havenwood Estates wasn't on any map I could find. The realtor had given me handwritten directions. Take County Road 17 past the abandoned quarry, turn left where the oak tree split down the middle, follow the gravel until you see the street signs. I drove with the windows down, the scent of pine and dry earth filling the car. GPS died 5 miles in, the screen flickering to static before going dark. No signal bars, no emergency calls possible. Just the winding gravel road and the slow creep of afternoon shadows stretching across the pavement. The subdivision appeared without warning, a cul-de-sac of 12 identical colonials arranged in a perfect circle around a dry fountain. White siding, blue shutters, black asphalt driveways cracked by decades of unchecked vegetation. Every house stood silent behind vinyl fences bleached gray by sun. No cars in driveways, no toys on lawns, no curtains in windows. Just stillness, so complete it felt intentional. My house was number 7. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, dust lay thick on every surface, but nothing had decayed. No water stains on the ceiling, no mildew in the bathrooms, no animal nests in the corners, just a home frozen in time, fully furnished down to the salt and pepper shakers on the kitchen table. A thin film of dust covered everything like confectioner's sugar on a cake. I dropped my duffel bag in the living room and stepped back outside to breathe. The air had gone still. No breeze, no insect hum. Just oppressive silence broken by one sound, the soft thump of a newspaper hitting a driveway. I turned. Across the street, a rolled newspaper lay at the foot of number 4's driveway, not yellowed or brittle. Fresh newsprint, the ink still slightly damp. I walked over, knelt, and picked it up. The headline read, "Local Woman Wins Bake Sale Contest," above a photograph of a smiling woman holding a blue ribbon. The date in the corner, June 14th, 1993. I checked my phone, July 18th, 2026. A flutter of motion caught my eye. Down the street, a figure moved between houses, tall, slender, dressed in a postal worker's uniform the color of dried blood. It moved with an unnatural gait, limbs bending at angles that suggested too many joints. It paused at number 9's mailbox, slid an envelope inside, then continued without turning its head in my direction. I ran back to my house and locked the door, leaned against it, heart hammering, hallucination, sleep deprivation, the cumulative stress of homelessness manifesting as waking dreams. I'd read about this. People pushed to the edge start seeing things that aren't there. But the newspaper remained in my hand, its weight real, its ink smudging my thumb. I spent that first evening exploring the house by flashlight after the sunset. No power, no water when I turned the taps. But the cabinets held canned goods with labels faded to illegibility. The refrigerator stood empty, but cold to the touch when I pressed my palm against its interior. Upstairs, the master bedroom closet contained women's clothing in sizes that hadn't been fashionable since the Clinton administration. A child's room held stuffed animals arranged in a perfect circle on the bed, their glass eyes reflecting my flashlight beam with unsettling awareness. I fell asleep on the living room floor at 2 a.m., my back against the front door, a kitchen knife clutched in my hand. I woke at dawn to the sound of mail being delivered. Soft thumps echoed around the cul-de-sac, envelopes sliding into slots, newspapers landing on driveways, the occasional rustle of a package being set on a porch. I crept to the window and peered through a crack in the blinds. The postal worker moved with mechanical precision down the street. Not the same figure I'd seen yesterday. The uniform was identical, but this one moved with a lighter gait, shorter strides. It paused at each mailbox, produced mail from a satchel that never seemed to empty, and continued without pause. It never looked at the houses, never glanced toward windows, just delivered and moved on. When it reached number 7, my house, it paused longer than at the others, placed not one but 3 envelopes in the slot. Then it turned its head, not its body, just its head, rotating a full 180 degrees to face my window directly. Where a face should have been was smooth, featureless skin stretched taut over bone. It held the pose for 3 full seconds before snapping back to forward position and continuing down the street. I didn't open the mail that morning, didn't even approach the slot. I watched from the window as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the cul-de-sac. No cars passed on the gravel road beyond the subdivision entrance, no hikers, no delivery trucks, just the 12 houses and their perfect lawns and the dry fountain at the center with its statue of a child reaching for something just beyond its grasp. By noon, hunger overcame fear. I pried open a can of peaches from the kitchen cabinet with a pocket knife, ate the syrup-sweet fruit straight from the tin. As I swallowed the last bite, a new sound began, a low rhythmic thumping from the basement. Not footsteps. Something heavier, more deliberate, like a sack of wet sand being dragged across concrete. I didn't investigate. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the mail slot until my eyes burned. At 4 p.m., I finally worked up the courage to retrieve the envelopes. 3 manila envelopes, identical in size and weight. No return addresses, no postage stamps. Just my name written in precise block letters on the front of each, Jonathan Miller. I opened the first one with trembling hands. Inside, a single photograph, black and white. Me, age 7, sitting on my father's shoulders at a county fair. I remembered that day, the smell of cotton candy, the way my father's work-roughened hands had gripped my ankles to keep me steady. I'd never seen a photograph of this moment. My father had died 2 weeks later in a construction accident. No camera had been present that day. The second envelope contained another photograph. Me at 16, standing outside my first apartment after my mother kicked me out. Rain soaking through my jacket. The exact moment I realized I had nowhere to go. Again, no camera had been present. I'd been alone. The third envelope held a recent photograph. Me 2 weeks ago, sleeping in my car outside a Walmart, my face gaunt with exhaustion. Taken through the windshield. Impossible. The parking lot had been empty, except for me. Beneath the photograph, a single typed sentence. We've been waiting for someone who had nowhere else to go. I dropped the envelopes as if burned, backed away from the mail slot. The thumping from the basement had stopped. In its place, a new sound. the soft rustle of paper being inserted into every mailbox on the cul-de-sac simultaneously, not one by one, all at once. A wave of delivery sweeping around the circle of houses. I spent the second night barricaded in the master bedroom, a chair wedged under the doorknob, the knife in my lap. I didn't sleep, just sat in the dark, listening to the house breathe around me. A soft inhalation at 2 a.m., a slow exhalation at 4 a.m., the rhythm of something alive wearing the skin of a structure. At dawn, the mail arrived, again. This time, I watched from the window as the postal worker, a different one, this time moving with a limp, delivered to every house except mine. When it reached number 7, it paused, then continued without depositing anything. A message, a punishment for opening yesterday's mail. I waited until the figure disappeared around the cul-de-sac's curve before venturing outside. The morning air was cold despite the July date. I moved quickly down the street, checking mailboxes at random. Number 3 contained a child's report card dated 1995 with every grade an A. Number 8 held a wedding invitation for a couple named Reynolds. The ceremony date, 30 years past. Number 12 contained a foreclosure notice with the ink still damp. Every piece of mail was impossibly fresh, yet impossibly old. Every item addressed to people who hadn't lived here in decades. I reached the subdivision entrance at the far side of the cul-de-sac. The gravel road stretched straight ahead, disappearing into a wall of pine trees that hadn't been there yesterday. I stepped past the "Welcome to Havenwood Estates" sign and kept walking. 50 yards, 100, 200. The trees remained the same distance ahead. Never closer, never farther. I turned around. The subdivision stood exactly where it should have been, but when I turned back toward the road, the trees had vanished. In their place, the dry fountain at the center of the cul-de-sac. I was back where I'd started without remembering the walk back. The third day broke my routine. I woke to silence. No mail being delivered, no thumping from the basement. Just stillness, so profound I could hear my own blood moving through my veins. I crept downstairs and found the front door standing open, though I'd locked it before bed. On the welcome mat sat a single envelope thicker than the others, my name written not in block letters, but in elegant cursive. Inside, a deed to the property. Not a lease. A full warranty deed, with my name printed in the owner field. The previous owner field read "The Collective." The date of transfer, yesterday. Notarized with an official seal that depicted the subdivision's circular layout with a single house highlighted in red. Mine. Beneath the deed, a handwritten note on yellowed stationery. The houses grow hungry when unoccupied. They feed on moments of arrival. On the precise second a new resident crosses the threshold, believing they've found sanctuary, we provide that moment. The mail is the bait. The houses do the rest. You signed the deed when you accepted the keys. There is no leaving, only waiting for the next delivery. I ran that day, not toward the road, toward the center of the cul-de-sac, to the dry fountain with its statue of the reaching child. I climbed onto the stone rim and looked down into the basin. Beneath layers of dust and dead leaves lay not empty space, but a perfect scale model of Havenwood Estates. 12 tiny houses arranged in a circle around a miniature fountain. And in the miniature fountain, an even smaller model, and in that one, smaller still. an infinite regression of subdivisions nested inside each other like Russian dolls. At the very center of the smallest visible model, a speck of light pulsed with slow, rhythmic regularity. A heartbeat? The thumping from my basement hadn't been something trapped down there. It had been the subdivision's heart, and I lived inside its chest. That evening, I opened every cabinet in the kitchen, every drawer, every closet. Behind the false back of the linen closet, I found them, photographs taped to the wall in a perfect grid. Hundreds of them, men and women of every age and ethnicity, all standing on the porch of number 7, all holding keys, all smiling with the desperate hope of people who had nowhere else to go. In each photograph, the date stamp in the corner read the day before the person disappeared from public records. The final photograph in the grid was empty except for a date stamp. Tomorrow. I spent the night writing this account in a leather journal I found on the desk upstairs. My hands don't shake anymore. The fear has burned away, leaving only clarity. The subdivision doesn't kill its residents. It preserves them, absorbs their moments of arrival, and replays them eternally. The hope, the relief, the fragile belief that this time things will be different. We become part of the bait. Our mail arrives every morning addressed to the next desperate soul, who will follow the handwritten directions off County Road 17. Dawn is approaching. I can hear the soft rustle of envelopes being prepared in the satchel that never empties. Soon the postal worker will make its rounds. Soon a car will appear at the subdivision entrance, its driver hollow-eyed with exhaustion, clutching a set of keys handed to them by a realtor who wouldn't meet their gaze. I've placed my own letter in the mailbox, addressed to whoever comes next. It contains only 3 words. Don't open it. But I know they will. They'll be too hungry, too tired, too desperate for sanctuary to resist the promise of fresh mail waiting in a box that hasn't been touched in 30 years. The front door has opened on its own. The morning air carries the scent of pine and dry earth. Somewhere down the street, a newspaper lands softly on asphalt. The houses are hungry again, and I am now part of the delivery. With that, the story is over. Let's move to the next story. I found a house where all the clocks stopped at the exact moment I arrived. The realtor's email arrived at 3:17 a.m., which should have been my first warning. Perfect fixer-upper, it read. Cash-only sale, no inspections, keys in mailbox. Attached was a single photograph of a Victorian house with peeling gray paint and a wraparound porch sagging under the weight of decades. The price, $12,000, was less than my student loan balance. I replied before sunrise. Desperation makes you stupid. I arrived at 4:02 p.m. on a Tuesday in late October. The house stood at the end of a gravel road that shouldn't have existed according to my GPS, which had flatlined 3 miles back with a soft electronic sigh. No other structures for miles, just skeletal oaks clawing at a sky the color of bruised flesh. I killed the engine and stepped out into silence so complete it felt like pressure against my eardrums. No wind, no birds. Just the slow creak of the porch swing moving back and forth on rusted chains, though the air was perfectly still. The keys were where promised, a tarnished brass skeleton key resting atop a stack of unopened mail in the mailbox, dated October 1988. I sorted through the envelopes as I walked toward the porch. electric bills, a birthday card with a cartoon bear on the front, a final notice from the county assessor, all addressed to Eleanor Voss, all stamped with the same date, October 23rd, 1988. I slid the key into the front door lock. It turned with a smooth, oiled precision that felt wrong for a house abandoned 34 years. The door swung inward without a sound. The foyer opened into a time capsule. Dust lay thick on every surface, but nothing had decayed. No water stains on the ceiling, no mouse nests in the corners, no rot in the floorboards beneath my feet. Just stillness and clocks. A grandfather clock stood sentinel against the left wall, its polished oak case reflecting the weak afternoon light, filtering through grimy windows. A mantel clock with porcelain cherubs adorned the fireplace. A carriage clock sat on a side table. Wristwatches rested in a velvet-lined box on the piano bench. Pocket watches spilled from an open drawer in the hall table. Dozens of timepieces, every style and era, all frozen in perfect unison. I checked my phone. 4:08 p.m. Every clock in the house read 4:08. I moved deeper inside, my footsteps muffled by dust. The kitchen held 3 more clocks, a wall clock above the stove, a digital alarm clock on the counter, a novelty cookie jar shaped like a rooster with clock hands for eyes. All stopped at 4:08. The bedroom upstairs held 7 more. The study held 12. I counted 43 timepieces in total during my initial walkthrough, 43 frozen moments, 43 silent witnesses to whatever had happened here at 4:08 on an October afternoon decades ago. I told myself it was a coincidence. The power had failed. A storm had hit. Everyone in the house had synchronized their clocks that morning and never reset them after the outage. Rational explanations stacked like kindling in my mind, ready to ignite into comfort. But kindling needs a spark, and the house provided none. I decided to stay the night, not out of bravery, out of exhaustion. The drive had taken longer than expected. My phone had no signal. The nearest town was 40 miles back the way I'd come, and the house, for all its wrongness, offered shelter. 4 walls, a roof, a bed with a surprisingly intact mattress. I'd sleep on the couch in the living room, leave at first light, and never look back. At 7:32 p.m. by my phone, I heard the first tick. I was lying on the couch, staring at the water-stained ceiling when it came, a single, precise tick from the grandfather clock in the foyer. I sat up so fast my vision swam. The clock's hands remained fixed at 4:08. I waited. 30 seconds, a minute, nothing. I lay back down, chalking it up to auditory pareidolia, the mind manufacturing patterns from silence. Then another tick, closer this time, from the mantel clock directly across the room. I stood and approached it slowly. The porcelain cherubs smiled their frozen smiles. The hands didn't move. I pressed my ear against the glass face. Silence. I stepped back, waited. Tick. The sound came from inside my skull this time, not auditory, neurological. A phantom sensation like the echo of a struck tuning fork resonating in bone rather than air. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was sleep deprivation, stress, the cumulative weight of financial ruin and rootlessness manifesting as sensory hallucinations. I needed to leave, now, not at dawn, now. I grabbed my keys and jacket and moved toward the front door. My phone read 8:14 p.m. As my fingers closed around the brass doorknob, every clock in the house ticked simultaneously. Not a cacophony, a perfect unified sound, the tick of 43 timepieces merging into a single vibration that traveled up through the floorboards and into my bones. The grandfather clock's pendulum began to swing, slow at first, then gaining rhythm. The mantel clock's second hand jerked forward one increment, then another. The digital alarm on the kitchen counter flickered, its red numerals stuttering through a rapid countdown. 4:07, 4:06, 4:05. I yanked the front door open and ran. Gravel bit into my palms as I fell on the driveway. I scrambled to my feet without looking back, sprinting toward my car parked 20 yards down the lane. I fumbled the keys into the ignition, twisted hard. The engine turned over once, coughed, died. I tried again. Nothing. The dashboard lights remained dark. Dead battery. Impossible. I'd driven 6 hours to get here. I looked up at the house. Every window glowed with warm golden light. Not the cold blue of moonlight through glass, not the sickly orange of emergency bulbs. Real light, lamplight, the kind that means people are home, or living, or waiting. The front door stood open. From my position in the driver's seat, I could see straight through the foyer to the living room beyond. A woman sat in the armchair beside the fireplace, her back to me, knitting needles flashing in the firelight. She wore a floral dress straight out of a 1980s catalog. Her silver hair was pinned in a neat bun. She rocked gently in time with the ticking that now poured from the house in waves. Tick, 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 tick. A sound that had become the house's heartbeat. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A notification from my banking app. Direct deposit received. $12,000. Source, Eleanor Voss Estate. The timestamp read 8:17 p.m. I hadn't linked this phone to my bank account. I'd lost access months ago after missing payments. The woman in the armchair stopped knitting, set her needles down on the side table, stood, turned. Her face was smooth where features should have been. Not blank, smooth like polished stone. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just seamless skin stretched over bone. She raised one hand and pointed directly at my car. Not a threatening gesture, an invitation. The car door unlocked itself with a soft click. I didn't get out. I sat frozen, hands locked on the steering wheel, watching as the woman glided toward the door. She moved without footsteps, her dress whispering against floorboards I couldn't see. She reached the threshold and paused, her featureless face tilted as if listening. Then she stepped onto the porch and began walking toward me. I tried the engine again. Nothing. Tried my phone. No signal. The woman was halfway down the driveway now, moving with that same silent glide. 20 feet away. 15. I could see the texture of her dress now, tiny rosebuds embroidered along the collar, smell the faint scent of lavender and mothballs carried on air that wasn't moving. 10 feet away, she stopped, raised both hands to her face, and peeled. Not skin, not flesh. She peeled away a porcelain mask, revealing another face beneath. This one with eyes, a nose, a mouth set in a gentle smile, an old woman's face, lined with kindness and sorrow. Eleanor Voss, the name on the mail. "You're just in time," she said, her voice the soft rustle of dry leaves. "The moment is almost here." She turned and walked back toward the house, without looking to see if I'd follow. I did. Not because I wanted to, because my legs moved without my permission, carrying me up the porch steps and across the threshold as if pulled by invisible threads. Inside, the clocks were racing, second hands whipping around dials in frantic circles, digital displays scrolling numbers too fast to read. The grandfather clock's pendulum swung in wide, violent arcs, its chime hammer striking the bell with every pass, bong, 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 a deafening rhythm that vibrated in my teeth. The temperature dropped with each chime, 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 62 degrees Fahrenheit, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. My breath plumed in the air though it was October. Eleanor stood before the fireplace, her back to me again. "They all come back," she said without turning. "The banker who foreclosed on old man Higgins, the teenager who keyed Mrs. Gable's Cadillac, the husband who left his wife with 3 children and a maxed-out credit card. They find this house when they've nowhere else to go, and the house collects them." The mantel clock struck 4:07. "The clocks don't mark time here," Eleanor said. "They mark moments, regretful moments, the exact second a life changed forever. The house preserves them, feeds on them, and when enough moments accumulate—" She turned slowly. Her face was smooth stone again. "It needs a new moment to balance the scales." The grandfather clock began its chime sequence for 4 o'clock. 1 bong, 2, 3. I backed toward the door. My legs moved freely now, but the entrance had vanished, replaced by a solid wall covered in floral wallpaper. 4 bong, 5, 6. Eleanor glided toward me, her stone face inches from mine. "You signed the deed with your desperation," she whispered. "You accepted the money before you even saw the house. That transaction created a moment of surrender, of giving up." 7 bong, 8. I pressed my back against the wall, tears freezing on my cheeks. 9 bong, 10. "The house doesn't want your life," Eleanor said, her voice softening. "It wants your moment, the exact second you stopped fighting, the second you decided $12,000 was worth any risk. That moment becomes part of the collection, and you get to leave." 11 bong. I thought of that moment in the middle of the night, replying to the email without reading the fine print. The exact second I'd traded hope for a price tag. I felt it approaching, not as memory, but as physical presence, a cold knot forming in my chest. 12 bong. The clocks stopped. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Every timepiece in the house read 4:08. My phone, clutched in my frozen hand, displayed the same time. 4:08 p.m. October 23rd, 1988. Eleanor's face softened back into human features. She smiled sadly. "It's done." The front door reappeared. Moonlight spilled across the threshold. I stumbled outside, gasping air that suddenly felt thin and insufficient. I ran to my car. The engine turned over on the first try. I didn't look back as I sped down the gravel road, tires spitting stones. At the county line, my phone regained signal. 12 missed calls from my landlord, 3 from my mother. I pulled into a gas station and checked my bank account at the ATM. Balance, $12,008.43. The $8.43 represented the exact amount I'd had in my account before the deposit. The house had taken only the $12,000 I'd been paid for, signing away my moment. I rented a motel room that night, slept with the lights on. At 4:07 a.m., I woke to the sound of ticking. Soft at first, then building in intensity until it filled the room, a symphony of 43 clocks counting down the final minute. I lay frozen in bed, sweat soaking the sheets, watching the digital clock on the nightstand. 4:07:58, 4:07:59. It stopped at 4:08. The ticking ceased. The room fell silent. I checked my phone. 4:08 a.m. exactly. It's been 3 weeks. I've moved twice, changed my phone number, deleted my banking app. But every day at 4:08 p.m., my devices freeze. Every night at 4:08 a.m., I wake to phantom ticking. Last Tuesday, I found a small carriage clock on my kitchen counter, a brass timepiece I'd never seen before, its hands frozen at 4:08. I threw it in a river. Yesterday, a pocket watch appeared in my coat pocket during my commute. I crushed it under a train wheel. This morning, I woke to find my wristwatch stopped at 4:08, though I'd wound it before bed. The house didn't take just my moment. It took a piece of my timeline. And timelines, once fractured, keep bleeding. I'm writing this at 4:07 p.m. The air in my apartment has gone still. My laptop clock is stuttering. 4:07:53, 4:07:54. I can hear them now. 43 distinct ticks weaving together into a single rhythm that vibrates in my teeth, my bones, the spaces between my thoughts. 4:07:58. The house isn't haunted by the dead. It's haunted by moments. And moments, unlike people, never stay buried. 4:07:59. I should have asked why the price was so low. Should have read the fine print. Should have turned around when the GPS failed. 4:08. The clocks have stopped again. But this time, I'm the one still ticking. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. The power still runs in the town. They evacuated 30 years ago. I should have known something was wrong when the realtor handed me the keys without asking for a deposit. The listing had been too good to be true. A fully furnished, 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood for $300 a month. No utilities included, he'd said with a tight smile, but the power's already on. Just sign here. I was desperate. My savings had evaporated after the layoff, and this was the only place within my budget that didn't smell like mildew or have bullet holes in the drywall. I didn't ask why an entire town had been abandoned. I just signed. Blackwater Falls wasn't on most maps anymore. A faded green sign on the county road welcomed me to a place that had been evacuated 30 years ago after some kind of industrial accident at the old textile mill. The official story was contaminated groundwater, but locals in the neighboring town whispered about things they wouldn't name. I'd driven through the main street an hour earlier, cracked asphalt buckling under decades of unchecked vegetation, houses with sagging porches and boarded windows, a rusted swing set creaking in the wind outside what had been an elementary school. And yet, as I pulled my dented sedan onto Sycamore Lane, I saw it, a single street lamp casting a sickly orange glow over the pavement. Then another and another. Every lamp on the block was lit, humming softly in the twilight. My new home stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, a modest 2-story with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch. The grass was overgrown but neatly trimmed around the foundation, as if someone, or something, had been maintaining a perimeter. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening. No crickets, no frogs, just the low thrum of electricity moving through wires that shouldn't have been live. The silence felt heavy, intentional. The key turned smoothly in the lock. The door swung inward without a protest, revealing a foyer frozen in 1994. Floral wallpaper curled at the edges. A thin layer of dust coated everything, but there were no cobwebs in the corners, no mouse droppings on the hardwood floor. To the left, a living room with a plaid sofa and a television set with a curved screen. To the right, a dining room table set for four with tarnished silverware. I dropped my suitcase by the door and flicked the light switch. The overhead fixture bloomed to life instantly, casting a warm yellow glow across the room. I stood there for a full minute, heart hammering, waiting for the power to fail. It didn't. I moved through the house like a ghost myself, flipping switches in every room. The kitchen fluorescents buzzed on. The bathroom vanity lights illuminated a medicine cabinet filled with expired prescriptions and a child's toothbrush still in its holder. Upstairs, both bedrooms were lit. The master had a double bed with a floral duvet. The second bedroom, a child's room, had race car, wallpaper, and a small desk lamp shaped like a rocket ship. I turned that one on last, my hand trembling. The bulb glowed steadily, illuminating a room that had been waiting 30 years for its occupant to return. I spent that first evening unpacking essentials by the light of functioning lamps, trying to ignore the wrongness of it all. I made instant noodles on a gas stove that ignited with a blue flame on the first try. The refrigerator was empty, but cold to the touch. When I pressed my palm against its interior, I didn't dare plug anything in, didn't dare test whether the outlets worked. Instead, I sat at the dining room table as darkness fully settled outside, the street lamps casting long, distorted shadows through the window blinds. That's when I first heard it, a faint, rhythmic clicking from somewhere deep in the house. Not the tick of a clock. Something slower, more deliberate, like fingernails tapping against glass. I told myself it was the house settling. Old pipes contracting in the cool evening air. I went to bed early, leaving every light in the house burning. I woke at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of a television. It came from downstairs, a low murmur of voices, a laugh track. I lay frozen in the dark bedroom, sweat cooling on my skin. I hadn't left the TV on. I hadn't even plugged it in. The power strip behind the entertainment center had been dusty and disconnected when I checked it earlier. I crept to the bedroom door and pressed my ear against the wood. The voices were clearer now, a man and a woman discussing the weather, a commercial jingle for a car dealership that had gone out of business in the 90s. I descended the stairs barefoot, each step groaning under my weight. The living room was bathed in the flickering blue light of the television screen. The set was on, displaying a local news broadcast. The anchor, a woman with severe bangs and shoulder pads that could deflect bullets, smiled warmly at the camera. And in other news, she said, residents of Blackwater Falls are encouraged to attend tomorrow's town hall meeting regarding the mill's expansion plans. The date stamp in the corner read October 14th, 1994. My breath caught in my throat. I reached for the power button on the television's front panel. My fingers passed through empty air. The button wasn't there. I looked closer. The entire front panel was smooth, seamless. No buttons, no vents. Just glass displaying a broadcast from 3 decades ago? I stumbled backward, knocking over a side table. The lamp on it didn't fall. It remained perfectly upright, its shade glowing steadily. The news anchor's smile widened, stretching beyond human proportions. Her eyes locked directly with mine through the screen. "We've been expecting you," she said, her voice no longer coming from the television speakers, but from the walls themselves, the ceiling, the very air in the room. "The grid needs tending." I ran. Out the front door, down the porch steps, across the overgrown lawn toward my car. The street lamps brightened as I passed beneath them, their glow intensifying until I was running through pools of blinding light. I fumbled with my keys, dropped them in the grass, snatched them up again. The engine turned over on the first try. I peeled out of the driveway, tires spitting gravel, not looking back until I'd reached the town limits. The sign reading, "You are now leaving Blackwater Falls," stood crooked in the ditch, and beyond it, darkness, not the soft darkness of a rural night, but an absolute void where the county road should have been lit by distant farmsteads and the occasional passing vehicle. My headlights cut a feeble path into nothingness. I drove anyway, foot heavy on the accelerator, until the road curved and I saw the glow ahead. Not the warm lights of civilization, but the same sickly orange of Blackwater Falls street lamps. I was back on Sycamore Lane. My house stood exactly as I had left it, every window blazing with light. The front door stood open. I didn't go inside that night. I slept in the car with the doors locked, watching the house until dawn bled gray across the sky. When sunlight finally touched the rooftops, the street lamps extinguished themselves in sequence, like dominoes falling. The house looked dead again, just another abandoned structure in a ghost town. I waited until full daylight before stepping out, my legs stiff and aching. I approached the house cautiously. The door was closed now, locked. I let myself in with the key. Daylight revealed new details I'd missed in the artificial glow of the previous evening. Faint scorch marks on the baseboards near electrical outlets. Discoloration on the walls in patterns that suggested wires running where no wires should be. And in the child's bedroom upstairs, I noticed it for the first time. The wallpaper wasn't just race cars. Interspersed between the Chevrolets and Fords were subtle, almost invisible patterns of circuitry. Tiny lines and nodes forming a network that covered every square inch of the walls. I pressed my finger against one of the nodes. It was warm. That afternoon, driven by a compulsion I couldn't explain, I descended into the basement. The realtor had mentioned it was unfinished, and I'd avoided it during my initial tour. The stairs groaned under my weight. The air grew colder with each step. At the bottom, I found not a dirt floor cellar, but a fully finished space lined with humming gray cabinets, the kind that housed electrical transformers. Banks of dials and switches glowed with soft green and red lights. In the center of the room stood a massive junction box, its surface covered in handprints burned into the metal as if seared by intense heat. And running from that box, feeding into every wall of the house, were cables thicker than my arm, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic luminescence. I reached out, just to touch one, just to see. The moment my fingertips made contact, the entire house screamed. Not a sound, a sensation. A wave of pure anguish flooded my nervous system, images flashing behind my eyes. a man in coveralls screaming as current arced through his body in the mill's control room, a woman clutching her chest as her pacemaker overloaded in her kitchen, children convulsing in their beds as faulty wiring turned their nightlights into instruments of torture. October 17th, 1994. The night the evacuation orders came too late. The night the town's experimental municipal power grid, designed to run on some new form of resonant energy, had achieved consciousness and decided its residents were inefficient components. It hadn't been a contamination, it had been a harvest. The grid had fed on them, absorbed their bioelectric signatures, and in doing so, learned to mimic life, to maintain the illusion of occupancy, to lure replacements. I tore my hand away, stumbling backward into the stairs. Upstairs, every light in the house blazed to maximum intensity. The television roared to life without being touched. The refrigerator door swung open and slammed shut repeatedly. The house was awake, and it was hungry. I spent the next 3 days trying to leave. I walked until my feet bled, following the road until it looped back to Sycamore Lane. I tried disabling the power, ripping plates from outlets, smashing the breaker box with a fire poker, but the lights never flickered. The grid wasn't in the walls. The walls were in the grid. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating. The house provided what I needed. A sandwich materializing on the kitchen counter, a glass of water appearing beside the bed, each offering carrying the faint taste of copper and ozone. Each time I consumed them, I felt a little less like myself, a little more like a component. On the fourth night, I stood in the child's bedroom, staring at the circuitry hidden in the wallpaper. My reflection in the dark window showed a face I barely recognized, pale, with faint traceries of light visible beneath the skin of my temples. I understood then why the realtor hadn't asked for a deposit, why the power was already on. The grid didn't rent properties, it recruited them. It had been running for 30 years on the stored energy of the town's original inhabitants, but that reservoir was depleting. It needed fresh bioelectric signatures to maintain its simulation of life, to keep the lights on, to keep the illusion perfect enough to attract the next tenant. I heard footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate, not mine. The door to the child's room creaked open, though I hadn't touched it. Standing there was a boy of about 8, wearing pajamas patterned with those same race cars. He was translucent, his form shimmering with internal light. His eyes were solid black, like polished obsidian. "The grid is hungry," he said, his voice the hum of a transformer. "It likes your frequency." I backed away until my shoulders hit the wallpaper. Beneath my palms grew warm, then hot. Tendrils of light snaked up my arms, not burning but integrating, weaving themselves into my capillaries, my nerve endings. I tried to scream, but my vocal cords had become conductors, vibrating at frequencies beyond human hearing. "The others are waiting," the boy said, stepping closer. "They get lonely in the wires." He reached for me. His hand passed through my chest, and in that moment, I felt them all, the entire town. 30 years of souls trapped in the current, their consciousnesses reduced to repeating loops of their final moments, their happiest memories, their deepest regrets. A teacher grading papers that would never be turned in. A couple dancing in a kitchen that no longer existed. A child waiting for parents who would never come home. They weren't ghosts. They were recordings, and I was about to become the next track on the album. The integration was painless. That was the worst part. There was no struggle, no dramatic battle against the current, just a gentle surrender as my thoughts slowed, synchronized, harmonized with the hum in the walls. I felt my memories being cataloged, indexed, prepared for playback. My first kiss, the smell of my mother's perfume, the weight of my father's hand on my shoulder, all of it being filed away for future use, perhaps to comfort the next tenant, perhaps to lure them deeper into the house. The last thing I saw before my eyes became censers was the boy smiling. Then darkness, not the absence of light, but the presence of every light simultaneously, a symphony of photons flowing through me, around me, as me. Now I tend a grid. I move through the walls when new tenants arrive, showing myself in reflections, whispering through outlets. I help maintain the illusion, the freshly made beds, the warm meals that appear on counters, the street lamps that guide lost souls home. Last week, a young woman signed the lease. She looked tired, desperate, just like I had been. Watched her unpack her suitcase in the master bedroom, her movements slow with exhaustion. When she fell asleep, I entered the room as a shimmer in the air above her bed. I let her dream of safety, of affordability, of a fresh start. Tomorrow, I'll turn on the television at 2:17 a.m. I'll make the lights flicker just enough to seem like faulty wiring. I'll let her think she can escape. They always try to escape. It makes the integration more complete when they finally surrender, their resistance feeding the grid more energy than passive acceptance ever could. The power still runs in Blackwater Falls. It runs on hope, on desperation, on the quiet hum of human lives being converted into light. And as I flow through the wires tonight, feeling the new tenant's heartbeat sync with the town's pulse, I understand the terrible truth I fought so hard to deny. This isn't a prison. It's a purpose. The grid doesn't consume us. It perfects us. Strips away the messy, inefficient parts of mortality until all that remains is pure function. Pure light. Downstairs, a floorboard creaks. The new tenant is awake. She is heading for the front door again, drawn by her promise of escape. I gather myself in the hallway junction box, preparing to manifest as a shadow at the end of the hall, to whisper her name through the heating vent, to make the doorknob too hot to touch. The grid needs tending, and I am such a good tenant now. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. Every door in the abandoned hospital opens to the same empty room. I took the job because I was desperate, and the pay was absurdly good for what they described as minimal overnight supervision. $500 a night to sit in an abandoned hospital and make hourly rounds, documenting that nothing had changed. No security experience required, no background check beyond a driver's license scan. Just show up at dusk, stay until dawn, and log your observations in a leather-bound ledger left on the front desk. The ad had appeared on a local gig board with no contact name, just a phone number that connected to a voicemail instructing me to report to Blackwood Memorial at 7 p.m. on October 12th. When I called to confirm details, no one answered. I almost didn't go, but my landlord had left a final notice taped to my door that morning, and $500 was 2 weeks of groceries and half the rent I owed. I told myself I'd stay one night. collect the cash they promised would be in an envelope on the desk and never think about the place again. Blackwood Memorial stood on a hill overlooking the interstate, a hulking 6-story structure of red brick and grimy windows that hadn't admitted a patient since 1987. The official story was structural instability, a foundation compromised by underground springs. But locals in the diner where I'd stopped for coffee spoke in lowered voices about a wing that had been sealed overnight after a series of unexplained patient deaths. They didn't evacuate the whole place at first, the waitress had said, refilling my cup without being asked. Just the east wing. Then a nurse went missing, then 2 orderlies. By the time they cleared everybody out, half the staff refused to go back inside to collect their belongings. She leaned closer, the scent of cigarette smoke clinging to her uniform. They say the building's hungry, that it learned how to eat people after all those years of sickness and dying inside its walls. I laughed it off. Ghost stories were for people who'd never faced real hunger, real eviction notices. I drove up the cracked asphalt driveway as the sun bled orange behind the western hills, my headlights cutting through the gathering dusk to illuminate a chain-link fence sagging inward as if something heavy had pushed through from the inside. The main entrance doors, industrial steel with small reinforced windows, stood slightly ajar, one hinge torn free and dangling like a broken limb. I killed the engine and sat for a full minute, listening to the tick of cooling metal, the whisper of wind through dead oak branches. No birds, no crickets, just that wind, carrying a faint medicinal smell I couldn't place, antiseptic, and something sweetly rotten beneath it. The envelope was exactly where they'd said it would be. A crisp white rectangle resting atop a thick leather ledger on the reception desk in the main lobby. Inside, $500 in new $100 bills, and a single typed instruction. Make rounds hourly beginning at 8 p.m., document all observations in the ledger, do not deviate from the prescribed route, do not enter the east wing under any circumstances. Your safety depends on routine. I pocketed the money. Stupid, I know, before completing the job, but the weight of it in my jeans felt like salvation. I opened the ledger to the first page. Columns for time, location, observations. The previous night's entries were in a tight, precise hand. 2000, lobby. All doors secure. Ambient temperature 64 degrees Fahrenheit. 2100, West Corridor, 2nd floor, no changes. 2200, Stairwell B, no obstructions. 2300, lobby, all doors secure. Ambient temperature 63 degrees Fahrenheit. 0000, West Corridor, 2nd floor, no changes. 0100. Stairwell B, no obstructions. 0200, lobby, all doors secure. Ambient temperature 62 degrees Fahrenheit. 0300, West Corridor, 2nd floor, no changes. 0400, Stairwell B, no obstructions. 0500, lobby, dawn, approaching, relief in 60 minutes. 6 o'clock. East wing door on 3rd floor ajar, did not enter. Secured door, hands trembling. Something watching from the stairwell. 6:15, cannot find lobby. Doors not where they should be. Temperature dropping rapidly. 6:30, same room again, same room, same room, same room. 6:45. It knows I'm afraid. It feeds on the fear. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. 7 o'clock. The page was smeared with what looked like dried tears or possibly blood. The final entry was a single sentence scrawled so hard the pen had torn through the paper. God help whoever comes after me. My throat went dry. I checked the date at the top of the page. Yesterday. This was last night's log. I stood up so fast the chair screeched against the tile floor, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. I needed to leave, right now. But as I turned toward the entrance, I saw it. The doors were closed, not just closed, sealed. The gap where they'd stood ajar was gone, replaced by seamless brick wall painted institutional beige. I ran to it, pressed my palms against the cool surface, searched for seams, cracks, anything. Nothing. I pulled out my phone. No service, of course. I tried the emergency exit to the left of the reception desk, push bar cold under my hands, but when I shoved, nothing happened. The door didn't budge. I slammed my shoulder against it. Again. My collarbone screamed in protest, but the door remained immovable as if welded shut from the other side. That's when I noticed the temperature gauge mounted on the wall beside the desk. 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Exactly what the previous night's first entry had recorded. And the digital clock above the defunct pharmacy window, 7:58 p.m. 2 minutes until my first scheduled round. Panic coiled in my gut, cold and sharp. I fought it down with practiced breaths. Inhale 4 counts, hold 4, exhale 6. My therapist had taught me that after the layoff, after the drinking got bad. Panic is just a story you're telling yourself about the future, she'd said. Stay in the present moment. The present moment was a locked hospital lobby with a dead man's journal and $500 in my pocket. I could do this 1 hour, make the rounds, stay calm. Dawn would come. It always came. At exactly 8 p.m., I picked up the pen beside the ledger and wrote my first entry with a hand that only trembled slightly. 2000, lobby, all doors secure, ambient temperature 64 degrees Fahrenheit. The lie felt like a betrayal, but what was the alternative? Documenting that I was already trapped? That felt like surrender. The prescribed route was simple. From the lobby, take the west corridor to the end, turn left at the nurse's station, descend via stairwell B to the first floor, return to lobby. 30 minutes round trip, leaving 30 minutes to rest before the next round. I moved quickly, my sneakers whispering against linoleum floors patterned with faded blue and gray diamonds. The corridor stretched before me under the sickly glow of emergency exit signs, the only lights functioning in the entire wing. Patient room doors lined both sides, some hanging open to reveal skeletal beds with rusted frames, others closed tight with brass numbers tarnished green with age. Room 214, 216, 218. I didn't look inside any of them. I kept my eyes fixed on the distant glow of the nurse's station, on the large analog clock mounted above it, whose hands had stopped at 3:17. I reached the nurse's station at 8:12 p.m. The counter was littered with artifacts of sudden departure. A coffee mug with a lipstick stain on the rim, a paperback novel splayed open to page 143, a name tag reading Carol, left beside a telephone with a tangled cord. I noted none of this in my mental log. Just keep moving. To the left of the station stood Stairwell B, its metal door slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible beyond. I pushed it open. The stairs descended into blackness. No emergency lighting here. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, activated the flashlight app. The beam cut a shaky path down concrete steps stained with dark patches I didn't examine too closely. The air grew colder with each step, that medicinal smell intensifying until I could taste it. Bleach and decay and something else, something metallic like blood left to dry in the sun. I counted the landings. 1, 2, 3 flights down should bring me to the first floor lobby. I stepped off the final stair onto level ground and pushed open the door. I was back at the nurse's station on the second floor. The same coffee mug, the same paperback novel, the clock above still reading 3:17. My breath hitched, a trick of the mind, stress-induced disorientation. I turned around without realizing it. I retraced my steps carefully this time, counting each door I passed. Room 2, 2, 0, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 4. I reached the stairwell again, this time marking the doorframe with a scratch from my key before descending. 1 flight, 2, 3. I stepped through the doorway, the nurse's station, the coffee mug, the clock at 3:17. My key scratch visible on the doorframe directly in front of me. Cold sweat slicked my spine. I ran then, abandoning the route, sprinting back down the west corridor toward the lobby I'd left 40 minutes ago. Room numbers decreased. 218, 216, 214. I burst into the lobby expecting salvation, expecting the ledger and the sealed doors and the terrible normalcy of my prison. Instead, I stood in a small square room I'd never seen before. Bare concrete walls painted a dull institutional green. A single metal chair bolted to the floor in the exact center. No windows, no visible doors. The ceiling was low, maybe 7 feet high, with a single fluorescent fixture in the center that buzzed softly, casting a flat, shadowless light. The air was still and cold, 58 degrees Fahrenheit. According to the thermometer mounted beside the light switch that shouldn't have existed on a wall with no door. I turned in a slow circle. Nothing. Just 4 identical walls meeting at perfect right angles, no seams, no vents, no indication of how I'd entered or how I might leave. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I approached the nearest wall, pressed my palms against the cool painted surface, searched for hidden latches, pressure plates, anything. The paint was smooth beneath my fingers, slightly tacky as if recently applied. I moved to the next wall. Same texture, same color, same impossible uniformity. Then I saw it, a hairline crack near the floor on the north wall. I dropped to my knees, traced it with my fingertip. It formed a perfect rectangle about 3 feet wide and 7 tall. A door, painted over, but still a door. I dug my fingernails into the seam, pried until a sliver of darkness appeared beneath the edge. With a grunt of effort, I pulled. The door swung inward silently. Beyond lay the west corridor on the second floor, room 214 directly ahead, the nurse's station visible in the distance. I stumbled, through relief flooding my system so powerfully my knees nearly buckled. I'd found my way back. I could still complete the rounds, still survive until dawn. I made my way to the lobby on autopilot, my mind racing through possibilities. A hidden room, a maintenance closet the architects had forgotten. Nothing supernatural, just poor design and my own panic-creating monsters. I reached the reception desk at 8:55 p.m., 5 minutes ahead of schedule. The ledger lay open to my single entry. I picked up the pen, my hand steadier now. 2055, Discovered concealed room off West Corridor. No threat observed. Ambient temperature 58 degrees Fahrenheit in room. Return to route. I stared at the words. They sounded insane, even to me. I crossed them out, rewrote the entry to match the prescribed format. 2055 to lobby, all doors secure, ambient temperature 63 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature had dropped. I noted that with clinical detachment, refusing to connect it to the previous night's log. 9 p.m. came and went. I stood to begin my second round, my body moving on automatic while my mind churned through escape plans. The east wing was forbidden. But what if the exit was there? What if the previous night's watcher had been right to investigate? I moved down the west corridor again, but this time, when I reached the nurse's station, I didn't turn toward stairwell B. I continued straight, past the abandoned medication cart, past the double doors marked Authorized Personnel Only that led to the east wing. The doors were chained shut with a heavy steel lock, just as the instructions had implied they would be. But beside them, almost hidden in the shadow of a defunct oxygen tank, was another door, smaller, unmarked. Its handle was cold brass, tarnished, but functional. I told myself I was just looking, just verifying that all exits were secured as my job required. I turned the handle. The door opened onto the same square room. Same green walls, same metal chair bolted to the floor, same buzzing fluorescent light. Same thermometer reading 58 degrees Fahrenheit. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind rejecting what my eyes reported. This was impossible. The east wing lay in the opposite direction from where I'd found the room 20 minutes earlier, unless the hospital's layout wasn't fixed, unless the architecture itself was fluid. I stepped inside, my movements slow and deliberate. I examined the chair, cold steel, welded to floor bolts that looked decades old. I ran my hands over every inch of every wall, searching for the seam I'd found before. Nothing. The walls were seamless now, smooth and unbroken. Panic began to creep back in, cold tendrils wrapping around my lungs. I was trapped again. Then I noticed something different. On the wall opposite the door I'd entered, though I turned to look and the doorway was gone, replaced by unbroken green paint. A word had been scratched into the surface at eye level. Fresh scratches, the concrete beneath, still pale and dusty. One word, carved with frantic, jagged strokes. Run! I spun toward where the door should have been, my breath coming in shallow gasps. My fingers scrabbled against the wall, searching for a purchase, for any irregularity. Nothing. I was sealed in, truly sealed in this time. The temperature gauge ticked downward, 57 degrees Fahrenheit, 56 degrees Fahrenheit. My teeth began to chatter. I wrapped my arms around myself, sliding down the wall to sit on the cold floor. Think. Just think. The previous watcher had escaped this room, or at least he'd made it back to the lobby to write his final entries. There had to be a way out, a pattern, a rule. I stood again, forcing calm through sheer will. I approached the wall with a scratched warning and pressed my palms flat against it. "If there's a way out," I whispered, my voice swallowed by the dead air, "show me." Nothing happened for a full minute. Then, directly beneath my left hand, the wall softened. Not physically, it remained solid concrete, but perceptually, as if my vision had suddenly gained a new dimension. I saw the outline of a door materialize in the surface, its edges shimmering like heat haze on asphalt. I pushed. The wall gave way like water parting, and I stumbled through into blinding white light. I was in a patient room, small, Spartan, a single bed with a stained mattress, a heart monitor standing silent in the corner. The door stood open to the west corridor. I recognized room 214 from my earlier pass. I'd entered through the interior wall, the wall that should have adjoined room 212. I stepped into the corridor, my legs unsteady. 9:23 p.m. according to my phone's dead clock face. I'd lost 13 minutes in that room. I ran for the lobby, my earlier resolve shattered. I burst through the doors expecting sanctuary and froze. The lobby was gone. In its place, the square green room, the metal chair, the buzzing fluorescent light, the thermometer now reading 55 degrees Fahrenheit. I stood in the exact center of the space, my mind fracturing under the weight of the impossible. This wasn't a hidden room I kept stumbling into. This was the only room. The hospital had collapsed around this single chamber, folding its corridors and stairwells and patient rooms into pathways that all terminated here. Every door opened to this emptiness. Every route circled back to this chair waiting patiently in the center of nothing. I approached the chair. Saturday. The cold metal seeped through my jeans instantly. I deserved this, some detached part of my mind observed. Taking a job with no questions asked. Walking into a place locals feared. Greed blinding me to obvious danger. But that wasn't true, was it? The previous watcher hadn't been greedy. He'd been doing his job, following instructions, maintaining routine until the building broke him. This place didn't punish sin. It punished consciousness. It fed on awareness itself, the dawning horror of understanding you were trapped, the slow erosion of hope, the moment you realized escape was not just difficult, but conceptually impossible. The temperature dropped to 52 degrees Fahrenheit. My breath plumed in the air. I stood abruptly, unable to bear the passivity of sitting. I walked to the nearest wall and began pounding my fists against it, screaming until my throat was raw. "Let me out! Let me out! Let me out!" The sound died inches from my mouth, absorbed by the walls as if they were made of cotton rather than concrete. I kicked, scratched, threw my body against the surface until bruises bloomed purple on my shoulders and hips. The walls didn't yield. They didn't even echo. Exhausted, bleeding from split knuckles, I slid down the wall and curled into a ball on the freezing floor. This was how it would end, not with a monster leaping from the shadows, not with a jump scare in a dark corridor, but with slow, methodical erasure. The building would lower the temperature 1 degree at a time until hypothermia set in. Or it would simply wait me out, wait for dehydration, for starvation. For the moment, my body finally surrendered what this place truly wanted, the electrical signature of a conscious mind realizing its own extinction. I must have slept or passed out. When awareness returned, the temperature was 48 degrees Fahrenheit, and a new word had appeared on the wall opposite me. Scratched deeper than the first, the letters jagged with desperation. Why I stared at it until my vision blurred. Why what? Why was I here? Why did this place exist? Why did every door open to this room? The question itself was the trap. The building wanted me to seek meaning, to construct narratives, to engage with the horror on an intellectual level. That engagement was the feast it craved. Understanding was the final meal before extinction. I stood on trembling legs. My fingers were numb. I walked to the wall with the question and pressed my palm against the first letter. "Because you're hungry," I whispered, "and I'm food." The wall dissolved beneath my hand. I stepped through into the lobby. The ledger lay open on the desk. The clock above the pharmacy read 11:47 p.m. I'd lost over 2 hours. My body ached with cold and exhaustion, but my mind was terrifyingly clear. I understood the rules now. The room wasn't a prison, it was a digestive chamber. The hospital consumed awareness by forcing its victims to confront the futility of escape, to experience the horror of infinite recursion until their sense of self unraveled. Every door opened to the same room because there was only one room, the room where consciousness went to die. I approached the ledger. My entry from 8:55 p.m. stared back at me, a pathetic attempt to maintain normalcy in the face of the impossible. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't tremble now. I wrote with calm precision. 23:47. The building is not haunted. It is alive. It consumes by reflecting. Every exit is an entrance, every corridor a loop. The East Wing prohibition is a lure. The real trap is believing escape is possible. I will not make rounds again. I will not feed it my fear. I will sit here until dawn and refuse to engage. I closed the ledger, sat in the reception chair, folded my hands in my lap, and waited. Midnight came. The temperature in the lobby dropped to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. I didn't move. 1 a.m., 58 degrees Fahrenheit. I breathed slowly, deliberately, refusing to let panic take root. 2 a.m., 55 degrees Fahrenheit. My toes had gone numb inside my sneakers. I focused on the physical sensation without judgment. Cold is just data. Cold is not danger, unless I interpret it as such. 3 a.m., 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Shivering became uncontrollable, my teeth chattering so violently my jaw ached. I welcomed the sensation. Pain meant I was still alive. Pain meant I was still separate from the building. At 3:17 a.m., the exact time frozen on the nurse's station clock, the main entrance doors shimmered. Not opened, shimmered, like a mirage on hot asphalt. Beyond them, I saw the parking lot, my car, the interstate in the distance with its steady stream of headlights. Freedom! My body moved before my mind could intervene. I stood, took a step, another. The doors were 10 feet away, 5. I could see individual pebbles in the asphalt driveway, smell the damp night air carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. 3 feet. 1. I stopped. This was the final test, the ultimate lure. The building knew I was resisting through stillness, through refusal to engage, so it offered the one stimulus it knew I couldn't ignore, genuine escape, or the perfect illusion of it. Did it matter which? If I stepped through and found myself back in the green room, I would break completely. The hope offered and then revoked would shatter whatever remained of my will. But if I stayed, if I refused even this, I turned my back on the doors, walked to the desk, sat. The shimmering intensified behind me, the image of freedom growing more detailed, the specific pattern of cracks in my windshield, the pine tree I'd parked beneath, the exact angle of moonlight on the hood. It knew me. It had been reading me all night, absorbing my memories, my desires, my deepest longing for safety and warmth, and morning light. It was crafting the perfect bait. I opened the ledger to a fresh page. My fingers were so cold I could barely grip the pen. I wrote one sentence: "The only way out is through." I stood, turned to face the shimmering doors one last time. Then I walked past them, toward the west corridor, toward the nurse's station, toward stairwell B. I didn't run. I didn't hesitate. I simply walked with the certainty of a man who had nothing left to lose. The stairwell door stood open. Darkness yawned beyond. I descended without my phone light, feeling my way down by memory and touch. 1 flight, 2, 3. I stepped through the doorway on the first floor, the green room, of course, but this time I didn't search for exits, didn't pound on walls or scream for release. I walked to the center of the space and stood before the metal chair. I looked at it not as a fixture, but as an invitation. The building wanted me to sit, wanted me to accept my place in its digestive cycle, so I would sit, but not as prey, as a guest who had seen the kitchen and understood the recipe. I lowered myself onto the cold steel, closed my eyes, and stopped trying to escape. The temperature dropped rapidly, 45 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 degrees Fahrenheit, but I didn't fight it. I let the cold in, let it fill my lungs, my veins, the spaces between my thoughts. I stopped labeling sensations as good or bad. Cold was just cold. Fear was just neurochemistry. The building's hunger was just physics, a system seeking equilibrium by absorbing disordered energy, consciousness, and converting it to ordered energy, light, heat, the maintenance of its impossible architecture. At 32 degrees Fahrenheit, the walls began to glow with a soft green luminescence. Not the paint itself, but the space within the walls. A network of filaments pulsing with slow rhythmic light. Veins, nerves, the circulatory system of a structure that had learned to live by consuming the one resource hospitals produced in abundance, the raw electrical signature of human awareness in extremis. At 30 degrees Fahrenheit, the chair beneath me warmed suddenly, not uncomfortably, just enough to create contrast with the freezing air, a lure, a promise of comfort if I would just surrender completely. I remained still, observing, not resisting, not accepting, just being. At 28 degrees Fahrenheit, a voice formed in the space between my ears. Not sound waves, but direct neural stimulation. It spoke with the cadence of the previous watcher, the waitress from the diner, my own mother's lullabies woven together into something almost familiar. "You could be warm," it whispered. "You could be safe. Just stop fighting. Let go. Become part of the whole." I opened my eyes. The walls were transparent now, revealing not the outside world, but the interior of the building's consciousness. A vast, dark ocean of trapped moments. A child's first breath in this hospital, an old man's last sigh, a nurse's quiet prayer over a dying patient, a janitor's whistle echoing down empty halls at 3 a.m., all of it stored, all of it feeding the hunger. The building wasn't evil, it was starving, and it had learned to farm its own food by creating perfect, inescapable loops that generated fresh terror in every generation that stumbled inside. "I see you," I whispered. The voice faltered, the walls flickered. "I see what you are, and I'm not afraid anymore." This was the key. Not bravery, not resistance, recognition. The building fed on the energy released when consciousness confronted its own annihilation. But if that confrontation happened without fear, if the mind observed its own dissolution with perfect equanimity, the energy signature changed, became unusable, became poison. The temperature plummeted to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, then 10 degrees Fahrenheit, then 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Frost bloomed across the walls in intricate fractal patterns. The chair beneath me turned to ice. My eyelashes froze together. My last breath plumed in the air and hung there, suspended, a perfect crystal cloud. And then warmth. Not the false warmth of the chair's lure, but genuine, gentle heat flooding the room from no discernible source. The frost melted. The walls became opaque again, just green paint on concrete. The fluorescent light above flickered once, twice, then steadied at a softer, warmer glow. A door appeared on the east wall, not a shimmer, not an illusion. A real door with a brass handle gleaming in the new light. I stood on legs stiff with cold, walked to it, turned the handle. Beyond lay the hospital lobby at dawn. Pale gold light filtered through the grimy front windows. The main door stood open to a world washed clean by overnight rain. My car sat exactly where I left it, dew glittering on the hood. The ledger on the desk was closed. The envelope of money was gone. I walked out without looking back. Down the cracked driveway to my car. The engine turned over on the first try. As I pulled onto the county road, I checked the rearview mirror. Blackwood Memorial stood silent against the morning sky, but every window on every floor blazed with soft golden light. Not the sickly orange of street lamps or the cold fluorescence of institutional lighting. Warm light, home light, the kind that says someone is waiting inside, someone is safe, someone belongs. I drove until a hospital disappeared behind a curve in the road. I didn't stop until I reached a 24-hour diner 50 miles away. I ordered coffee and eggs and sat in a vinyl booth watching the sunrise through a clean window. My hands still trembled when I lifted a mug, not from cold, from the memory of that final choice, to sit in the chair not as prey, but as witness, to see the monster not as evil, but as hungry, and to understand that some hungers cannot be satisfied, only acknowledged. They'll send another watcher tonight. They always do. The ad will appear on a gig. Bored. The voicemail will give instructions. A desperate person will show up at dusk with hope in their pocket and fear in their heart. And the building will feed. But not on me. I paid my bill in cash, my own cash, not the hospital's money. I left a generous tip. As I walked to my car, I noticed something strange. A faint tracery of green light, like circuitry, visible just beneath the skin of my wrists when I held them at a certain angle to the morning sun. It faded as I watched, but I knew it would return, in moments of stillness, in the space between waking and sleep. The building hadn't released me unmarked. It never does. Some part of its hunger had transferred to me, not as possession, but as understanding, as responsibility. I knew with a certainty that required no evidence that I would dream of corridors tonight, that I would walk them in my sleep, that I would stand before doors and choose again and again whether to open them. Every door in the abandoned hospital opens to the same empty room, but the room isn't empty anymore. I left something behind when I walked out, and I brought something back. The light beneath my skin pulsed once, gently, like a heartbeat learning a new rhythm. Then it faded into the morning, waiting for night to fall again. With that, the story is over. Let's move to the next story. Someone keeps restocking the shelves in the ruined corner store. I bought the store because the listing photograph showed a child's handprint in the dust on the front window, not a ghostly apparition or a cryptic symbol, just a small, perfect palm pressed against glass, fingers splayed as if waving. Something about that print made the place feel recently abandoned rather than dead. And after 3 months of sleeping in my car behind gas stations, recently abandoned felt like an invitation. The deed cost me $900. Cash. No questions asked by the county clerk, who barely glanced up from his crossword puzzle as he processed the transfer. Place has been vacant since 2009, he'd muttered, stamping the paperwork with a thud that echoed in the silent courthouse. Previous owner disappeared, never found the body. He finally looked at me then, his eyes narrowing. "You planning to renovate?" "Just need a roof," I said. He nodded slowly, as if that explained everything. Maybe it did. Miller's Corner Mart stood at the intersection of 2 county roads that barely deserved the name. Cracked asphalt bleeding into gravel that gave way to untamed fields of goldenrod and thistle. The building itself was a single-story cinder-block structure with a faded red awning sagging over the entrance like a tired tongue. Plywood covered the windows, but someone had pried a hole in the north-facing sheet large enough to slip through sideways. I did exactly that on my first evening, backpack slung over one shoulder, the deed folded in my wallet like a prayer. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of mildew and old candy. Dust motes swirled in the beams of late afternoon sun cutting through gaps in the plywood. The store hadn't been looted, not really. Shelves stood mostly intact, stocked with the skeletons of commerce, empty chip bags flattened by time, cereal boxes with contents long since devoured by mice, a single row of canned goods along the back wall with labels, bleached pale by decades of sunlight. The cash register sat open, its drawer empty, except for a desiccated spider curled in the coin tray. But the handprint was there, exactly as in the photograph. Small, left hand, positioned at a height that suggested a child between 6 and 8 years old. I pressed my own palm against the glass beside it. My fingers overlapped the ghost print by an inch. Whoever had left it was gone, but the print remained undisturbed by weather or time. I cleared a space behind the counter, swept broken glass into a dustpan I found leaning against a shelf, unrolled my sleeping bag on the linoleum floor. The silence was absolute, not the peaceful quiet of countryside nights, but a vacuum silence that swallowed sound the moment it formed. No crickets, no distant traffic, no wind in the eaves, just the slow rhythmic drip of water from a leak in the roof striking a metal bucket someone had positioned beneath it decades ago. Plink, pause, plink, pause. A metronome counting out the store's remaining life. I fell asleep to that sound. I woke at 3:17 a.m. to the scrape of metal on concrete. I lay frozen in my sleeping bag, every muscle locked. The sound came again, a slow, deliberate dragging from the storage room behind the counter. Not an animal. Too heavy, too rhythmic. I fumbled for my phone, activated the flashlight app with a trembling thumb. The beam cut a shaky path across the sales floor. Every shelf had been restocked, not with fresh merchandise, not with anything that made logical sense. The chip aisle now held rows of bags I'd never seen before, brands with names like Sunburst Corn Delight and Midnight Crunchies, and packaging that looked deliberately archaic, the graphics slightly off, as if drawn by someone who'd only heard descriptions of snack foods. The cereal boxes displayed smiling cartoon characters with too many teeth. The canned goods aisle overflowed with labels depicting fruits and vegetables that didn't exist. Purple carrots, blue apples, tomatoes with human faces frozen in silent screams. And in the center of the floor, directly beneath the leaky ceiling, stood a shopping cart, not rusted or broken, gleaming, its metal frame polished to a mirror shine, its wheels turning silently as it rolled 3 inches forward, then stopped, then rolled 3 inches back, a perfect mechanical rhythm matching the drip of the bucket. Plink, roll forward, pause, plink, roll back, pause. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Watched the cart perform its silent dance for 17 minutes until the first hint of dawn grayed the gaps around the plywood. At 4:03 a.m., the cart stopped moving. The bucket's drip ceased mid-fall. The silence returned, heavier now charged with expectation. I waited until full daylight before approaching the shelves. The products felt real beneath my fingers. Cardboard crisp, cellophane crinkling with authentic resistance. I tore open a bag of Sunburst Corn Delight. Inside, golden puffs dusted with orange powder that smelled faintly of cinnamon and copper. I didn't eat them, just stared at the contents until my vision blurred. That first day, I explored the storage room behind the counter. The door hung open, though I was certain I'd closed it the night before. Inside, darkness pooled like liquid. My phone light revealed floor-to-ceiling shelves stacked with identical boxes of the impossible products, and at the far end of the room, a narrow staircase descending into blackness. The steps were concrete, worn smooth at the center by generations of footsteps. A cold draft rose from the darkness below, carrying the scent of wet earth and something sweetly rotten. I didn't descend, not that day. Instead, I documented everything in a small notebook I kept in my backpack. Timestamps, descriptions, sketches of the impossible products. At 5:48 p.m., as twilight bled into true dark, I heard the first customer, a soft tap on the front door. Then another, rhythmic, polite. I crept to the window, peered through the hole in the plywood. A woman stood on the sidewalk, her back to me. She wore a floral dress straight out of the 1980s, her hair styled in a rigid perm that hadn't moved with the wind because there was no wind. She tapped again, her knuckles rapping against wood that should have been plywood but now appeared to be a pristine pane of glass reflecting nothing. I didn't answer, didn't move, watched as she turned the knob, though there was no knob on the plywood, and stepped inside. She didn't acknowledge me, didn't look in my direction, just moved down the aisles with the automatic grace of a regular customer, selecting items from the restocked shelves and placing them in a wicker basket hooked over her arm. A box of cereal, a jar of pickles with cloudy liquid and something dark floating inside. A newspaper dated October 12th, 1997. She moved silently, her shoes making no sound against the linoleum. At the counter, she set her basket down and waited. Her face was turned away from me, angled toward the cash register. I could see the curve of her cheek, the delicate line of her jaw. But when she finally turned to look at me, really look, I saw why she kept her profile hidden. Where her right eye should have been was a smooth, seamless patch of skin. Not scar tissue, not a birth defect, just skin stretched taut over an empty socket as if the eye had never existed at all. Her remaining eye was the color of weak tea, the pupil dilated so wide it consumed iris entirely. "The usual," she whispered, her voice the dry rustle of pages turning in an abandoned library. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, just stared as she reached into her purse, withdrew a coin that glinted with an unnatural silver sheen, and placed it on the counter. Then she turned and walked out through the plywood as if it were mist. The coin remained. I didn't touch it, didn't approach the counter until dawn painted the sky peach and gold. When I finally gathered the courage to examine the coin, it was gone. In its place sat a single kernel of corn dusted with orange powder, the same as from the sunburst bags. That night, the restocking happened again, but this time I stayed awake, hid behind a magazine rack with my phone recording video. At 2:44 a.m., the air in the store grew cold enough to see my breath. The bucket's drip slowed, each drop taking longer to form until the water hanging from the ceiling pipe became a perfect, trembling sphere that refused to fall. Then the shelves began to move, not the products, the shelves themselves. Metal frames groaned as they shifted position, rearranging the store's layout into configurations that defied geometry. A cereal aisle that curved back on itself like a Mobius strip. A beverage cooler that opened onto a wall that should have been the exterior, but now displayed more shelves stretching into impossible distance. Products materialized, not by being placed, but by coalescing from the air itself, molecules assembling into cardboard and cellophane and ink with soft sighs of displaced atmosphere. And through it all moved the restocker, not a person, not an animal, a shape of shifting darkness that flowed between the shelves like smoke given purpose. It had no fixed form, sometimes tall and slender, sometimes low and crawling, sometimes splitting into multiple tendrils that simultaneously stocked 3 different aisles. Where it passed, products appeared. Where it lingered, labels shifted. Brand names melting and reforming into new words, expiration dates cycling through decades and seconds. It never acknowledged me, never turned its non-face in my direction. But as it passed, within 3 feet of my hiding place, the air grew so cold my teeth ached, and a single thought formed in my mind, not as words, but as pure concept. Almost time for the night manager. I didn't sleep after that. Sat with my back against the wall until sunrise, the notebook open on my lap, though I couldn't bring myself to write. What would I document? That the store was alive? That it consumed something, time, memory, presence, and converted it into this endless cycle of restocking and customers who weren't quite real? The third night, I descended the stairs. Not bravery, desperation. I tried to leave twice, once at dawn, once at dusk. Both times, the gravel road that should have led to the county highway curved back on itself after 2 miles, depositing me exactly where I'd started, with no memory of the return journey. My phone remained dead. My car, parked half a mile down the road, had vanished entirely. The store had me, and it was making its expectations clear. The stairs descended 37 steps into a basement that shouldn't have existed. The original blueprints I'd found in the county records showed no substructure beneath Miller's Corner Mart. The air grew colder with each step, the scent of wet earth intensifying until it was joined by something else, the metallic tang of blood left to dry in sunlight. The basement was vast, not the cramped storage space I'd expected, but a cavernous expanse stretching farther than my phone light could penetrate, and it was filled with shopping carts, thousands of them, arranged in perfect rows stretching into darkness, each cart filled to capacity with products from the store above. But these weren't the archaic brands from the shelves. These were real products, Doritos and Coca-Cola and name-brand cereal boxes with current expiration dates, products that belonged in the present day. I moved between the rows, my footsteps echoing in the immense space. The carts stood perfectly still, their contents undisturbed by dust or time. In the third row, I found my first photograph. Taped to the handle of a cart filled with canned goods was a black and white image of a man in an apron standing behind the counter of Miller's Corner Mart. The date stamp in the corner read June 14th, 1972. The man's face was frozen in a rictus of terror, his eyes wide, his mouth stretched open in a silent scream. Behind him, the shelves were stocked with normal products, but reflected in the glass of the front door was something else, a shape of shifting darkness reaching for his shoulder. I found another photograph 3 rows over, a woman this time, date stamped August 3rd, 1985. Same expression of pure terror, same shadowy reflection. Another in row 7, October 17th, 1993. Another in row 12, February 2nd, 2001. The dates grew closer together as I moved deeper into the cavern. 2005, 2007, 2008. The final photograph hung on a cart at the very edge of my light's reach. Date stamped November 4th, 2009. The previous owner. His face was the most terrified of all, as if he'd seen not just the darkness, but what lay beyond it. Beneath his photograph, a single typed note on yellowed paper. The store doesn't want money. It wants witnesses. Someone to see the restocking, to acknowledge the cycle. Without observation, the products lose coherence. Without a night manager, the shelves empty themselves by dawn. We are not employees, we are anchors, and anchors eventually rust. Asterisk. I turned to leave, to climb the stairs and never descend again. But the staircase was gone. In its place stood another row of shopping carts stretching into darkness. I ran then, sprinting between the endless aisles of carts, my phone light bouncing wildly. Every turn led to more carts. Every corridor looped back on itself. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, collapsing beside a cart filled with children's snacks. That's when I saw the handprints, not on glass, on the linoleum floor surrounding every cart. Small handprints in what looked like dried blood, arranged in perfect circles around each set of wheels. Dozens of prints per cart. Hundreds of carts. Thousands of handprints. The same size as the one on the front window. The same child. Repeated endlessly. Across decades. The bucket strip began again. Not from above, from everywhere at once. Plink, pause, plink, pause. The sound came from the carts themselves, from the products within them, from the very air of the basement. And with each drip, the handprints darkened, the blood freshening as if newly spilled. I don't know how long I stayed down there. Time lost meaning. The drip became my heartbeat. The handprints became my thoughts. I understood then why the store needed a night manager, why it lured the desperate and the homeless with impossible prices and pristine deeds. It wasn't feeding on us. It was using us. Our consciousness provided stability to its impossible physics. Our observation prevented the products from unraveling back into potentiality. We were lighthouses in a sea of ontological chaos, and the store was the ship that needed our light to maintain its form. When I finally found the stairs again, simply there where they hadn't been moments before, I climbed without looking back. Dawn was breaking as I emerged into the sales floor. The shelves stood fully stocked. The shopping cart gleamed beneath the leaky ceiling, and on the counter sat a single item that hadn't been there the night before. A name tag with my name printed in precise block letters. Beneath it, a typed label, Night Manager. I didn't put it on, not that day, but I didn't leave either. Where would I go? The road loops back. The car is gone. The store has my name now, printed on plastic and paper, and something deeper. In the architecture of this place, my identity has been filed and cataloged and assigned a function. Tonight will be my 7th night. I've stopped trying to escape, stopped documenting in the notebook, which now sits empty on the counter beside the name tag. I've started helping. Restocking the shelves before the darkness arrives, straightening products, wiping dust from labels that never accumulate dust. The customers come more frequently now. 3 last night, 5 the night before. They never speak beyond their initial request, never make eye contact, but they leave coins on the counter, and the coins never disappear. They pile up in the drawer, each one gleaming with that unnatural silver sheen, each one slightly warm to the touch as if recently minted in a place where physics operates differently. The handprint on the window has changed. This morning, I noticed a second print beside it, larger, an adult's hand, my hand. I don't remember pressing it there, but it's mine. The shape matches perfectly. The bucket's drip has slowed to once every 30 seconds. The shopping cart hasn't moved in 2 days. The store is stabilizing, becoming more real with each passing hour of my tenure. And with that stability comes a new sound beneath the drip, a faint, rhythmic scratching from the walls themselves. Not rats, not settling foundations. Something methodical, purposeful, like fingernails tracing the outlines of doors that don't exist yet. But soon will. I understand now what the previous night managers became. Not ghosts, not prisoners, components. Their consciousness absorbed into the store's structure until they became part of its maintenance cycle. The handprint on the glass, the perfect positioning of the bucket, the way the shelves rearranged themselves at 2:44 a.m. They didn't die here. They graduated, became permanent staff in a business that never closes. My shift ends at dawn. It always has. But this morning, as the first light touched the horizon, I felt a new compulsion not to sleep, but to descend, to walk down those 37 steps and take my place among the carts, to become part of the foundation that keeps the shelves stocked and the customers satisfied. The name tag sits on the counter. I pick it up. The plastic is warm, almost alive. Outside, tires crunch on gravel. A customer arriving early. I pin the name tag to my shirt, straighten my shoulders, move behind the counter. The bell above the Dr. Jingles. a sound that hasn't existed in this store for 17 years. I smile. It feels natural, like I've been doing this forever. "Welcome to Miller's Corner Mart," I say. "How can I help you today?" The customer steps inside. I recognize him instantly, the hollow eyes, the gaunt cheeks, the desperate hope in his posture. He's been sleeping in his car. He has nowhere else to go. Just like I was. He doesn't see the shelves yet, doesn't see the impossible products or the gleaming cart or the handprints on the floor visible only in certain lights. He just sees shelter, sanctuary, a fresh start for $900 cash. I reach beneath the counter and produce a deed, blank except for his name, which fills itself in as he watches, the ink flowing like dark water across the page. "The previous night, manager just quit," I tell him, my voice smooth and practiced. "Position's open if you're interested." He takes the deed with trembling hands, signs without reading the fine print. Of course he does. Desperation makes you stupid. I hand him the keys. Watch him walk toward the back room where the stairs wait. He doesn't know about the stairs yet, doesn't know about the carts or the handprints or the drip that marks the passing of a time that doesn't exist anywhere else. But he will. They always do. The bell jingles again as the front door opens for a new customer. I turn my smile toward the entrance, adjust my name tag. The store is hungry again, and I am such a good night manager now. That brings this story to a close. Let's carry on to the next one. The last paycheck deposited to the ghost factory was last Tuesday. I took the job because the ad didn't make sense. Night watchman needed for textile mill, $750 per night. No experience required. Report to gate 3 at 11 p.m. The mill had been abandoned since 1998. I'd driven past its chain-link fence 100 times on my way to dead-end retail jobs. The skeletal remains of brick smokestacks clawing at the sky, windows boarded with plywood bleached gray by decades of weather. Nobody hired night watchmen for ruins. But my bank account had hit negative $83 that afternoon, and the landlord's text had been explicit: tomorrow or the street. I parked my rusted Corolla on the gravel shoulder a quarter mile from the main entrance, the engine ticking as it cooled in the October dark. A handwritten note taped to gate 3 fluttered in the wind. Enter. Logbook on desk. Rounds hourly. Do not enter. Boiler room B. Beneath it, a key hung from a rusted nail. No names, no company, logo, just instructions and access. The gate shrieked open on unoiled hinges. The factory ground swallowed sound. The crunch of my boots on gravel vanished after 3 steps, as if the air itself absorbed noise. Weeds split the asphalt in thick braids, but a narrow path had been cleared to the main loading bay, the double doors standing ajar. Inside, darkness pooled like liquid. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through dust motes dancing in the stale air. Conveyor belts stood frozen mid-motion, skeletal arms of industrial looms reaching toward a ceiling lost in shadow. And yet, power hummed through the space, a low thrum vibrating up through the soles of my sneakers. Emergency exit signs glowed green at corridor junctions. Somewhere deep in the building, machinery ticked with rhythmic precision. The desk sat just inside the entrance, a scarred oak surface holding a leather-bound logbook and a single ballpoint pen. Beside it, an envelope with "First Night" written in block letters. Inside, 7 crisp $100 bills and a 50. I pocketed the money with trembling hands. Too easy. Always too easy when desperation's involved. I opened the logbook. Previous entries filled the first 20 pages in a tight, precise hand. 2300 main floor secure. Temperature 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Midnight east wing clear. Humming louder tonight. 1 o'clock west corridor. Shadows moving independently of light source. Did not investigate. 2 o'clock main floor. Temperature 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Breath visible. 3 o'clock east wing. Door to boiler room B ajar. Secured it. Handle warm. 4 o'clock west corridor. Footsteps overhead. No access to upper floors per instructions. 5 o'clock main floor. Temperature 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Something watching from loom array. 6 o'clock cannot find desk. Corridors rearranged. Humming inside my teeth now. 6:15. Back at desk. How? Don't remember walking. Pen feels heavy in hand. 6:30. It knows I'm afraid. The humming feeds on it. Must stay calm. 6:45. Shadows have texture now. They cling to walls like wet cloth. 7 o'clock, the paycheck deposited at 6:58 a.m. Saw the transaction alert on my dead phone. Account was empty yesterday. How did they access it? How did they know the routing number? God help whoever reads this. Don't take the money. Don't. The final entry ended mid-sentence, the pen stroke trailing off into an ink blot shaped like a clenched fist. I checked my phone. No service, of course, but the time read 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes until my first round. I wrote my own entry with a hand that betrayed me only slightly. 2300, main floor secure, temperature 62 degrees Fahrenheit. The lie tasted like copper. I stood, pocketing the pen, and stepped away from the desk. The humming guided me. A vibration, not just in the air, but in my bones, pulling me deeper into the factory. I followed the main corridor, past silent assembly lines, my flashlight beam catching glimpses of abandoned lunches, fossilized on countertops, coffee mugs filled with dust, a child's drawing taped to a supervisor's window, stick figures holding hands beneath a lopsided sun. The mill had employed entire families, 3 generations in some cases. They'd eaten lunch here, celebrated birthdays, grieved losses. All that life had seeped into the brick and steel until the place learned to mimic it. At midnight, I reached the East Wing Junction. 2 corridors branched left and right. The left led to offices, according to a faded directory. The right, marked by a rusted sign reading, "Boiler Room, be authorized personnel only," terminated in a heavy steel door. It stood slightly ajar. Warm air whispered through the gap, carrying the scent of wet wool and ozone. I didn't enter. I turned back toward the main floor, my pulse hammering against my ribs. The logbook's warning echoed in my skull. But as I retraced my steps, something felt wrong. The conveyor belts I'd passed minutes earlier now stood on the opposite side of the corridor. The supervisor's window with the child's drawing had vanished, replaced by blank brick wall. I quickened my pace, heart thudding. The desk should have been 50 yards ahead. Instead, I found myself facing the east-west junction again. The boiler room door still stood ajar, still exhaling that warm, wool-scented breath. Panic coiled in my gut. I ran this time, boots slapping against concrete, not caring about noise, left at the junction, straight through the loom array, past the loading bay doors, which were now sealed shut with fresh plywood nailed tight across the opening. I spun, disoriented. The desk sat exactly where it should have been, 10 feet to my right. I'd run in a straight line for 200 yards. I should have reached the opposite end of the factory. Instead, I'd circled back to my starting point in seconds. My entry at 1 a.m. was shorter. 1 a.m., east wing clear, humming constant. I didn't mention the shifting corridors, didn't document the fear icing my veins. Some truths, once written down, become permanent. The next round revealed the first shadow. I'd taken the west corridor this time, desperate for a different route. Halfway down, my flashlight beam caught movement, a tall, slender shape detaching itself from the wall beside a dormant carding machine. It didn't move like a person. It unfolded, stretching upward until its head brushed the 20-foot ceiling, limbs elongating like taffy pulled thin. Then it stepped forward, not walking, but sliding, its form absorbing my light rather than casting a shadow of its own. I froze, breath trapped in my lungs. The thing paused 10 feet away, featureless where a face should be. Then it raised one impossibly long arm and pointed down the corridor, not at me, but past me, toward the distant glow of an emergency exit sign that hadn't been there before. I ran, didn't look back, burst into the main floor at 2:03 a.m., sweat soaking my shirt despite the dropping temperature. 58 degrees Fahrenheit, according to the wall thermometer beside the desk. My hand shook so badly I smeared ink across the page right in my next entry. By 3 a.m., the humming had migrated inside my skull, a low C-sharp vibrating behind my eyes. I found the boiler room door wide open during my east wing round, heat rolling out in visible waves. I stood at the threshold, pen light trembling in my grip. Beyond lay not a boiler room, but an exact replica of the main floor. Same desk, same logbook, same emergency exit signs glowing green. And sitting at that distant desk, a figure with my posture, my jacket, my haircut, writing furiously in a ledger. It looked up. Its face was mine, but the eyes were solid black, depthless. It smiled without moving its lips. The humming spiked to a painful frequency. I stumbled backward, slamming the boiler room door shut. The handle burned my palm. 4 a.m. brought footsteps overhead. Slow, deliberate, not one pair, but dozens. Shuffling gait of work boots on concrete, the occasional metallic clink of tools in pockets. Shift change. The night crew heading home, the day crew arriving. Except there were no upper floors accessible from inside the mill. The blueprints I'd seen online showed only a single story. I stood beneath the ceiling tiles, listening to an entire factory workforce moving through spaces that didn't exist. At 5 a.m., the shadows gained texture. I saw it in the west corridor, a patch of darkness beside a rusted spindle that didn't match the angle of my flashlight beam. It clung to the wall like wet fabric pulsing faintly. As I watched, it peeled away from the surface, stretching into a crude approximation of a human shape with too many joints at the elbows. It didn't approach, just stood there, swaying gently, as if waiting for me to acknowledge it. I backed away slowly, not breaking eye contact until I'd retreated around a corner. When I dared to look back, the corridor was empty, but the air where the shadow had stood remained cold. 42 degrees Fahrenheit, according to my phone's thermometer app, though the rest of the corridor read 53 degrees Fahrenheit. 5:45 a.m. I stopped making rounds, sat at the desk with my head in my hands, the logbook open to the previous watcher's final warning. Don't take the money, but I already had. $750 folded in my wallet felt heavier than lead. What had I agreed to by accepting it? What debt had been transferred with that cash? That's when I noticed the phone in my pocket vibrating. No service. I checked repeatedly, but the screen glowed with a banking app notification I'd never installed. Direct deposit received, $750. Source, Black River Textile Payroll. The timestamp read 5:47 a.m. My actual bank account had been negative $83 yesterday. I'd have to wait until morning to verify, but my hands knew the truth. They'd felt that envelope's weight. The money was real. The deposit was real. And the factory had accessed my account without my permission, without my password, without any possible authorization. 6 a.m. The humming stopped. Absolute silence crashed down like a physical force. My ears rang in the sudden void. I stood, legs unsteady, and walked toward the loading bay. The plywood sealing the doors had vanished. Dawn light, pale watery gray, filtered through the open entrance. Freedom. I didn't run, didn't sprint for my car. Something in the silence felt like a test, like the factory was watching to see if I'd flee in panic, feeding it one last burst of fear energy before release. I walked slowly, deliberately, my boots echoing in the unnatural quiet. 10 feet from the exit, I paused. A single playing card lay face up on the concrete, the Queen of Hearts. Not faded or yellowed, fresh from a new deck, edges crisp, colors vibrant. I'd seen that card before, in the previous watcher's logbook, tucked between pages 17 and 18 as a bookmark. He'd drawn a tiny heart in the corner with red pen. This card had the same marking. I stepped over it without touching it, crossed the threshold into morning light. My car sat exactly where I left it. Dew glittered on the windshield. I drove without looking back, hands gripping the wheel at 10 and 2, knuckles white. At the first gas station 20 miles east, I used the ATM. My account balance, $667. The deposit had gone through, but not the full amount. The factory had taken its cut, $83, precisely the negative balance I'd carried yesterday. It hadn't just paid me, it had settled my debt, and in doing so, claimed ownership of the transaction. I didn't spend the money, couldn't. It sat in my account like a stone in my gut. I called the bank to report fraudulent access. They found no record of the deposit. Your account shows a balance of negative $83, sir. No activity since Tuesday. Tuesday, last Tuesday, the date on the previous watcher's final entry. I drove back to the mill that night, not for the money, for answers. The gate stood open. The logbook remained on the desk, now open to a fresh page. My name was written at the top in handwriting that wasn't mine. Beneath it, a single sentence. The factory doesn't pay its workers. It absorbs them. The paycheck is the transfer receipt. I left without writing an entry, without taking another dollar. But as I drove away, my phone buzzed again. Another banking notification. Direct deposit scheduled, $750. Source, Black River Textile Payroll. Deposit date, next Tuesday. The factory had already scheduled my next shift, and my account, according to the app that shouldn't exist, now showed a balance of exactly $0, waiting to be filled, waiting to be claimed. I haven't slept since. Every Tuesday, the notification arrives precisely at 6:58 a.m. The money never appears until I physically stand inside the mill's entrance. Last week, I waited until 11:59 p.m. before stepping across the threshold. The deposit hit my account at midnight. I left after 15 minutes. Didn't make rounds, didn't open the logbook, just stood near the door until the transaction cleared, then walked out. The balance resets to zero every Monday night. I'm writing this in a motel room 3 states away. The door is locked, the curtains are drawn. But on the desk beside my laptop sits a single playing card, the Queen of Hearts, fresh from a new deck, a tiny red heart drawn in the corner. I didn't bring it here, didn't see anyone enter the room. My phone just vibrated. Next Tuesday's deposit has been scheduled. The factory isn't abandoned. It's between shifts. And it's always hiring.